Call this meeting to order. Again, apologies for the delay. We've just been waiting on some technical difficulties with the elevators and some other items, but we'll get started, and if anyone is delayed, we'll deal with that during the meeting. Welcome everyone to the Committee of Adjustment meeting of March 26, 2019. My name is Mario Russo, Committee Chair. This is a meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. The Committee of Adjustment is composed of 5 citizen members. Today we have 3. The other 2 have sent their regrets. The committee is composed of 5 citizen members, as mentioned, and they are appointed by Brampton City Council. The committee is authorized by the Ontario Planning Act to consider applications for minor variances from the provisions of the City of Brampton zoning bylaw. The committee also considers applications for consent, sometimes referred to as land division applications, which includes severing a new lot from an existing lot, a lot addition, easements, mortgages, or leases in excess of 21 years. I'd like to introduce the committee members. Firstly, to my immediate right, member Mr. Ron Chetta. To my immediate left, member Ms. Desiree Doffler. And again, my name is Mario Russo. Seated at the table in the front, we have Ms. Ginny Myers, Secretary-Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. And seated near your podium, we have city staff members. Staff, can I please get your introductions?
I'm Shelby Swinfield, Development Planner.
Adam Farr, Manager, Development Review.
I'm Elizabeth Corazola, Manager of Zoning and Sign Bylaw Services.
Neil Chadha, Development Planner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Neil Grady, Development Planner.
Proceed. We have some procedural matters to take care of. We have the adoption of the minutes meeting held March 5th, 2019. Committee members, you have those minutes before you. Yep. Any questions or concerns? May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
As presented in March 5th, 2019. Seconded. All in favor? That carries. We move on to declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare on any matter being discussed today?
Chair, A18139, previous working relationship with the property owner.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the same file, A18139, also a previous relationship with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Seeing none, we move on to withdrawals and deferrals. I believe we have 2 deferral requests. We have one for application A19007 by Glenn Schnarr and Associates. Is the agent present? Nature of the deferral request, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We filed a deferral letter on Wednesday, March 20th.
Just your name and for the record, apologies.
Raymond Jamba from Glenn Schnarr and Associates.
Okay. Proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we filed a deferral letter on Wednesday, March 20th, and subsequently we received the region's comments that noted that the lands were entirely within the focus area of the Greater Toronto Area West Transportation Study Area. Mainly on this, one of the second points from the region that I would like to bring to note is that there's also, in relation to, it's also, my apologies, here it is. It's also within Block 472, Block Plan 47-2, which is currently being reviewed by the city and the region. And the region also notes that understanding both the impacts of the proposed changes in uses with respect to the block plan and the GTA West study area is necessary to understand the requests. Sorry, just a little nervous. The region also notes that as a result of these 2 things, they're unable to assess the impact of the proposed changes, and the application is essentially premature. We would prefer an indefinite deferral, but understanding that the city is frowning upon that, we are open to a 1-year deferral if that is acceptable.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with the deferral request?
Staff have reviewed the deferral request. We are not in support of the deferral. We are requesting a refusal of this application. We don't believe that any additional information that the applicant can present to us at this time would change our recommendation at this point. We believe that an indefinite deferral or a deferral of this matter of any point would be not appropriate, and we believe that this application should be heard at this time, and it should be refused at this time at this hearing.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions, concerns?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to the applicant, the request for either the request or a one-year deferral, what do you hope to achieve with that length? Obviously, you're looking for a lengthy deferral.
The region has highlighted that it's difficult to understand the impact of our request without fully understanding if it is within the focus area and the impacts of that study and how it would impact the uses, especially with the corridor and the Mayfield access and transportation restrictions, as well as the other surrounding application in the area.
Any other comments?
Through you, Chair, to the staff.
Just the microphone.
Through you, Chair, to the staff, as the agent brought this about GTA West Corridor study, is that relevant in your opinion?
While it is a part of the overall decision, how we made our overall decision, it is only a very small part of our decision. We're of the understanding that the minor variance application fails on a number of tests, including the official plan, the secondary plan, the block plan, technical difficulties, including traffic and servicing. And also it should be noted that this application has, that a separate application for this property, the consent, has also been brought to the LPAT. So in accordance with all of those factors, we believe that this application at any point would be considered not appropriate, and we believe that this minor variance application, again, should be refused. This a report was written in January for this. It was recommended for refusal. The applicant requested a deferral. During that time, no new additional information was provided to us, and we feel accordingly that this application should be refused.
And from just, I guess we'll leave it to the committee to make the decision. I'll just put in that, from my perspective, the relevance of the regional comments, and in light of the 413 coming into the equation, a deferral is somewhat understandable. I don't agree or believe that the time frame is reasonable, and whatever else or any other issues that need to be dealt with would probably need to be dealt with immediately, because of the fact that it has been discussed at length with city staff. So would a 2-meeting or a 1-meeting deferral be something that your applicant, your clients would be agreeable to, or
Yes.
is that
Yes, we would be agreeable to that.
would that be something that staff would be, even though I do understand the description from staff, would that be something that would be at least somewhat agreeable to?
I don't believe, I mean, you'd have to speak with the region about this, and we'd have to speak about it further, but their evaluation of this application was that they would require, to quote from their report, it is recommended that the committee defer application until the Ministry of Transportation provides clearance of this application. Now, I'm not sure about the timing of the Ministry of Transportation, but as far as I've experienced in the past, it takes a little bit more than a month. So, and again, we don't believe that any information from the GTA West Corridor will have a salient impact on this application. We believe that our recommendation were for refusal would still stand clear above and beyond any recommendations or any findings of the GTA West corridor. Again, we're if we're discussing whether this application at this point for this part in the procedure, if we're discussing whether this should be deferred or not, we're still requesting in this hearing that we hear it today rather than defer it.
Okay, I leave it at the, I leave it for committee. And any questions, or if not, seeking a motion to proceed with the deferral request?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would suggest a 60-day deferral. I respect and understand the city's position, but I don't think we're in a position if we're feeling that we're missing some information. So as much as the applicant is looking for a rather extended period of time, it would be in your best interest to secure new information at the very least, and as much as information as is possible in the event that the city can look at this again with a positive report.
So just for clarity, 60-day, or is there a meeting time, two meetings or 3 meeting deferral?
Whatever would be closest to the 60-day.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the 60-day time frame would likely take you to a hearing date of May 28th.
Okay, so May 28th.
Okay. Do we have a seconder to that?
Through you, Chair, I tend to agree with staff, but at the same time, as Stoffler mentioned, any new information, even though as the discussion took place, but I'll support the motion from Stoffler for May 28th.
Okay. Seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. This is deferred to the May 28th meeting.
Thank you.
And just as a note, we don't know what will come forward, but it has been deferred a few times, so I don't believe that after that there would be the same consideration.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. One additional request for deferral for item A19045.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Hannah Bamapour. I appear as legal counsel on behalf of Nawan Nanak Sarta with respect to the lands located at 187 Deerhurst Drive. Mr. Chairman, we're requesting a deferral of the application today. As the planner on the file was unable to attend and speak to the application. We also would like the opportunity to meet with staff to either scope or resolve some of the concerns raised in the staff report. I did speak with Mr. Nasir Mahmood on Friday, March 22nd, and was advised at that time that staff would not object and that they would be open to the opportunity to meet with our planner to discuss the application.
Okay, thank you. And I did see that in the notes as well. I would include that we did receive a letter of objection, so that would be included in the file as well. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in, please? Sir, would you like to step forward? So just for clarity, at this point in time, we're not dealing with the application. We're just dealing with the deferral request.
Okay. Okay, then never mind. I apologize.
Okay. You could put just could put a statement forward if you like, or you want to wait until we.
Supporting the objection letter.
Okay. So it's up to you if you wanted to be on the record. If not, we can deal with the deferral request at this time. Okay. No other people would like to step forward? Seeing none? Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff received a last-moment request Friday afternoon for the deferral of this application from the applicant's lawyer, and she indicated that because the related planner would not be available for this meeting, Therefore, the application should be deferred. So, although staff is not in favor of this application, we reluctantly agreed to not object to the deferral request. And meanwhile, we have also received a letter from a property owner to the immediate east of the subject lands, 42 Wentworth Court, who has indicated that if this application is allowed, then his current permitted industrial use would be put into non-compliance with the pertinent standards. So in view of the situation, staff is tempted towards withdrawing our consent to agree to the deferral request, and we leave it to the committee to decide whether to defer this application or not.
Okay, and as noted, that letter was received and will be included in the for the record.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I wonder if we could seek then, if I'm in the hands of the committee, but if we could defer, I'm wondering if we could have the opportunity, maybe perhaps meet with the objectors to determine what the concerns perhaps may be and whether or not there may be a resolution of some sort.
Okay. Well, I mean, from my perspective, and again, the committee can speak to this, is there is some complexities here. So anything that can be discussed is always better to be done so before we come to the committee. And there hasn't been a request on this one before, if I'm correct. There has not been a deferral on this item before. So, committee members, would you like to weigh in with any comments, concerns?
To you, Chair, just to the gentleman who just stepped up, are you from 42 Wentworth Court?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I understand staff's perspective, but given the time, if I'm okay with the deferral request they are putting forward. Just my concern is if they want to sort it out things as the agent is requesting, the deferral is April 6th, which is the next meeting. Would that be appropriate for that much time, you think?
Well, having understood now that there has been an objection letter filed, I wonder if we can postpone it to the date following April 16th. I believe it may be May 7th. That would potentially provide us with some time to meet with the objectors and staff to try to scope the issues.
Okay. Ms. Myers, is that the May 7th meeting? That would be...
Mr. Chair, yes, that would be May 7th.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by committee members? Then seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to defer.
Excuse me, from the staff perspective, I think it's important that you understand that the letter that's been received from the objector is just indicative of issues that could be faced by many property owners surrounding this property. The notion that that particular objector could meet with the applicant, somehow be satisfied, would not negate the many different other potential issues in this area, and that's central to the staff refusal. Staff were particularly concerned about any kind of support for deferral given the unpredictability of when any of the businesses in that area might encounter a compliance issue associated with this proposal. So I think it's important for you to understand that as a rationale for deferring, to limit it to resolving issues or attempting to resolve issues with this one objector. I'm not sure that's a necessarily broad enough factor to consider the deferral, given, as I said, the unpredictability of different businesses' compliance requirements in that area. So it's just something for you to consider.
I appreciate that. And obviously, with compliance issues there, timing is of the essence. So again, I leave it to the committee to whether we maintain the 16th, the 7th, or not grant the deferral request. So I leave it to committee to put the motion forward. So,
through you, Mr. Chair, I understand Mr. Farr's concerns. I'm familiar with this particular area. We had 2 applications last year from Wentworth Court, and we had lengthy discussions about this particular area. But given the fact it's time, if they can resolve a few things, then I'm always in support of that. So I put forward the motion to defer to May the 7th, 2019.
Do we have a seconder?
Mr. Chair, before I reply,
Please.
just one further question, either to the applicant or to the city. Is there an order to comply? Has there been an order to comply been issued?
Yes, I can confirm that there has been an order issued against this particular property. There are no compliance issues associated with the permitted industrial uses in the area. The requirements in the zoning bylaw relative to sensitive uses and their proximity to waste transfer stations in particular, which is what I believe you're going to hear, is that the separation is to any lands zoned residential, institutional, or open space. The lands that are currently occupied by this private school are not zoned residential, institutional, or open space. They're still zoned industrial. So the separation distance issue is a non-starter because the lands are simply zoned to permit industrial uses. The order that's been issued is in respect to the permitted uses on this land, which is not how it's being operated at this point in time. So the only compliance issue is associated with the use of an industrial building for purposes that are not permitted in the bylaw.
So, sorry, just to speak to that, notwithstanding that the zoning bylaw is not necessarily the determining factor here, the official plan policies are crystal clear, and there are issues beyond the municipality's jurisdiction here through the TSSA, through provincial MOE compliance requirements that could be impacted by any approval decision. And to be honest, I just don't know whether there's any issues in the interim that could be provoked by a decision to defer. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think I understand the complexities of this. I don't know when the order was issued. My concern is that this facility has been in operation for 10 years. Obviously, people are aware of it, even though it wasn't occupied perhaps legally or officially. So I think from my perspective, I'm looking at that as well, and I'm hoping that if we defer this, that there is a way forward for that specific issue. In other words, I don't know if you would be able to stay where you are if you're looking for alternative facilities. That might be appropriate.
And if I can just add, we are in the process of advancing a rezoning application on another site, hence the temporary use that's been requested. I don't intend to get in all of that at this time. As I mentioned, the planner, had he been able to attend, would have been able to address all of that, but I do want to mention that there is an alternate site that we're advancing applications on to be able to move once that's all.
Okay. So just just to be clear, so we do have one motion that has been tabled, seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? That does carry. So this is deferred to the May 7th meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So quickly, sir?
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Richard Domes from Gagnon Walker Domes Ltd. We are the agent for a...
So we're still dealing with the items. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, for deferral.
Okay.
We're in, I'm representing Fatah Developments, Inc., which is application A18139. And through the committee's declarations of interest, I noticed that 2 of the 3 members sitting today declared conflict, which means that for my particular application, if members Nurse and Ms. Member Crouch are not going to be in attendance at all, I don't have quorum. So
absolutely, and we were going to deal with that in line or in order of the agenda. Would you like to put forward in the request for deferral at this point in time?
I think that to save some time for myself,
sure.
I probably would put that request forward,
Understand.
please, to the next available committee meeting. We were prepared to come to address the item today, but given the situation, the next meeting would be.
Yes, definitely, I understand that. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? And just for clarity, this application, Oh, understand.
So if we are,
Yeah, I think at this point in time, it is appropriate that we deal with this in lieu of the fact that there won't be quorum, or likely won't be quorum. So if the members would like to step away, and then I can deal with that solely at this point in time. So just for clarity, this is, the application is 1453 Queen Street West, A18 139. For people and members in the crowd, just to understand, we had 2 members that have actually declared a conflict. It is just myself that is still here. The other 2 members have not had not been at this meeting. Therefore, we do not have quorum to proceed. So the agent has put forward a request for deferral.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just remind you that if the agent is asking for a deferral, we don't have quorum to deliberate on that request.
Okay.
So the application should stay on the agenda as it was listed and then be brought forward, at which time we won't have quorum if nobody attends other than those that have declared conflict, and then we'll deal with it at that time.
Okay. So
But
for
we don't, we
procedural
just,
matters,
yeah,
absolutely.
we just don't have a quorum here to vote on a deferral request.
Okay. So understanding that, Mr. Domes, we'll keep that in the agenda just for procedural matters. We cannot deal with it at this point in time.
Secretary Treasurer for
Okay.
acknowledging.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Myers, for clarity. So we'll proceed with the agenda. And just quickly, we have been going through some procedural matters, but just for those that have not been to committee before, I'll just give a brief scope. Following some procedural matters which we have already undergone, the Secretary Treasurer will then call the applications by announcing the application number, the name of the applicant, and the address of the property subject to the application. The applicant or authorized agent representing the applicant will then come down to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and then present the application. I request that you reserve any questions or comments pertaining to the staff report until after planning staff has had an opportunity to present. If there is anyone in attendance who wishes to speak to a particular application, you will be given the opportunity to do so when the application is presented. Any decision made here today may be appealed to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, the LPAT. Previously, the appeal process was dealt with the Ontario Municipal Board. However, the province has introduced new legislation in the form of Bill 139, which came into force April 3rd, 2018. Appeals received in the City Clerk's office associated with minor variance and consent applications will be processed and forwarded to the LPAT, as they were previously processed through the OMB as stated. This process may be commenced with the Secretary Treasurer by filing a completed appeal form and filing fee within the prescribed 20-day appeal period. Information pertaining to the appeal process may be obtained by contacting the Secretary Treasurer within the City Clerk's office. We now move on to new consent applications.
Calling application B19004, Valada Banca. The property is located at 32 Mara Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning,
Good morning.
members. My name is Anya Godek. I'm appearing on behalf of the property owner, Bratislava Banka. The property addresses that we're dealing with are 32 Mara Crescent and 34 Mara Crescent, and Mrs. Banka is present at the hearing as well. This application is for the creation of an easement for right-of-way purposes in favor of 32 Mara Crescent over 34 Mara Crescent. As a matter of fact, this is for the recreation of the easement rather than an establishment of a new easement. Mrs. Banka purchased one property in 2003 and subsequently purchased the neighboring property without realizing that the two properties would merge, and at the time that the property merged, the easement basically ceased to exist. We did have a hearing on January the 8th for the severance application to sever both properties, and we established a property line between the two properties. The application was granted. with several conditions. All of the conditions have been met, with the exception of this one, which is the reestablishment of the easement. So we are asking for the committee's consent to reestablish that easement.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
This application fulfills the condition that was previously issued by the committee on January 8, 2019. It's a straightforward establishment of an easement as described by the applicant's agent. So staff's undertaken a thorough review of the proposal relative to the provisions prescribed in the Planning Act, and we advise the proposed consent application is considered to represent proper and orderly planning and can be supported from a land use perspective. Approval will allow fulfillment of the conditions of approval for consent application B18-028.
Okay. Any questions by committee members to staff? Okay. We do have, there is no conditions that staff is imposing, correct? We do have a condition by the Secretary Treasurer.
This was a condition of the previous approval, so this is just cleaning up one from the previous decision.
Right, but there's no additional conditions that have been
No.
put forward. So we do have that one condition. So, ma'am, do you understand and agree to those conditions, or to
Yes.
that condition?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, I do.
So if there's no further business, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to support the staff's support.
Okay, and approved. Motion seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That carries. That is approved.
Thank you. I do have one request on behalf of Mrs. Bunch as well. It was a last-minute request that was submitted to Ms. Jeannie Myra yesterday regarding a partial reimbursement of costs.
Absolutely, and we will deal with that at this time. We first dealt with the application in its entirety. Now we will deal with the request. Correct, Ms. Myers?
That is correct, through you,
Okay.
Chair.
So you may proceed, I guess.
Well, as one of the staff members has mentioned, this was, the creation of the easement was basically granted as a condition of the severance application. So all the issues regarding this had been considered by staff prior to the January 8th hearing. And I guess it would be perhaps fair to say that the fact that the consent wasn't officially asked for was a rather an oversight. So it is a little unfair to Mrs. Banka that she had to pay the full fees again to reconsider something that had been taken into consideration previously. She's an elderly person. She's selling one of the properties simply because she cannot maintain the property any longer. She's had to spend considerable funds to obtain the severance. As a result of the situation that she wasn't aware of, the closing of the sale had been postponed. Originally, the closing was to take place at the end of October. Since then, Mrs. Banka had to continue to pay the carrying costs of the property. She has to reimburse the buyer, or rather, she had to grant them free rent, continue to pay the mortgage, continue to pay the property taxes, insurance, and some other additional fees for the buyer. So she is in quite a difficult situation at this point, and that's the reason for her request.
Understanding. Staff, would you like to speak to the request, if there's any recommendations or any input that you'd like to include on that?
Staff are sympathetic, obviously, to the submission that's been made. However, the condition that was imposed on the consent application was a consent that the applicant agreed to, and as a result, staff can't support a request for a refund on the basis.
Understood. And I guess committee members, any questions or concerns? I'll just add my, I'm extremely sympathetic as well, and oftentimes quite empathetic to that. However, the reality is the fact that the condition that was already put in place could have been dealt at that time. If there was a staff error or some part from the city, I think there would be, I just think the precedent that we do create, even though every application is dealt with individually, it just would not be right at this point in time, but I will leave it to committee members to have their input as well.
Through Chair, I do agree with you, as I'm fully sympathize, and especially the sale back in October versus now could have brought your client in a better financial situation in regards to the real estate sale. But given the fact, unfortunately, I won't be able to support.
Any other comments? No? Okay, seeking a motion to for the reimbursement request by the applicant and by the agent.
Motion to refuse the reimbursement request.
Okay, motion to refuse by Mr. Chadha, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? Unfortunately, that carries.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Good day.
Calling application A19012, St. Joseph of Nazareth Anglican Church, located at 290 Balmoral Drive.
Good morning, my name is Marco Vandermaas. I am Associate and Project Design Architect at Kirkor Architects and representing the congregation of St. Joseph of Nazareth Anglican Church on Balmoral Drive, and Father David is also here representing the community. Is there a possibility of showing the plan on the screen? Or I also have a little stick with some slides.
We have the copies as well. Technically, I believe there is, but I don't know if it is working at this point in time. It is?
I always like to show pictures
Absolutely.
as an architect.
I think you're good to go from the technical side.
Okay. And do I just... okay.
Just bear with us as we're getting through the technical side.
Through you, Chair, the technical team at the back, they said that the flash drive, they can't...
Can't read the flash drive at this point in time.
Okay.
Will the overhead be
Even if the
accessible?
plan that was submitted can be shown? Otherwise, I guess I can...
Well, is the overhead accessible? Yeah?
Do they have...
Yeah. Do you have a copy that we can put on the overhead at this point in time?
No. I'll just...
Okay, let's just proceed.
Sorry.
Understanding, and we do have all that. I mean, that would be great for the public.
Absolutely.
But
Thank
we
you
do have all the information.
to the committee for hearing our request for minor variance. The variance is limited to 1, which is a side yard setback, reducing it from 7.5 meters to 0.9 meters. This site setback is along Brooklyn Drive, and we are requesting this variance because the congregation has been in the neighborhood for a long time, and since the 60s has been worshiping in the northern building, and then in the 80s an addition was built that is fully accessible, but is starting to get too small for the growing community. And the idea is to increase the sanctuary that was built in the 80s, thereby connecting by a way of ramps for accessibility needs the building that was built in the 60s, because they're on different levels. So the multi-purpose rooms in the older building is only accessible by stairs, and we would like to do it without using elevators. And so there's less sort of strain on the congregation for maintenance and upkeep. It would just be a ramp that would connect these floor levels. And therefore, it's quite a long ramp, because there's actually 2 meters between the levels, both going up and down from the sanctuary level. And thereby, the most efficient way is to sort of reach towards Brooklyn Drive, and getting very close to the property line to make that ramping work. We do believe that there is actually an added benefit to that, to the community, because currently there's the main entrance only from the parking lot behind the building, so to speak. And we think that by having these ramps sort of accessible and visible to the bigger community and the neighborhood, makes this building not just accessible for disabled people and elderly people, but also for the community at large. So be more visible, because as the community the facility has been there, the trees have grown up, so the church is less visible, and so the addition, I think, could bring a little bit more prominence to the facility, and of course update it and give the opportunity to extend its life into the future.
Thank you. And yeah, we are definitely blessed in Brampton, in particular Bramley, with lots of land on some of these church sites. But it's great to see that you're still growing and hopefully can continue to add to the community. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, we do have a letter that I'll put forward for the record by the TRCA, basically recommending a conditional approval. You do have that in your file as well, sir?
That's right.
Okay. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The variances with respect to relief from a portion of the proposed addition to the existing place of worship within the exterior side yard. And staff have evaluated the application based on the 4 tests as prescribed in the Planning Act. And staff is recommending approval with conditions. I'd just like to note, Mr. Chairman, and just read from page 3 of my staff report. And as follows: staff is satisfied that the proposed minor variance is sufficiently specific to the circumstances of this application to be supportable in this specific case, without otherwise setting a precedent for side yard reductions of this magnitude, given the limited extent of the encroachment of the building addition into the side yard, the long-standing established nature of the institutional use, urban design considerations and screening to mitigate impact and enhance integration into the surrounding area, lack of technical concerns expressed through the review of this minor variance application and the site plan pre-consultation application, and finally, the absence of public opposition to date, Mr. Chair. So with that, the recommended conditions of approval are as follows. 1, that a full site plan application shall be submitted within 180 days of the committee's decision, or within an extended period of time as approved by the Director of Development Services. And the site plan shall be approved and implemented to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services. 2, that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public meeting notice. And finally, Mr. Chair, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. And as I do appreciate you bringing forward the specific nature and the non-precedented precedent setting, even though all committee decisions are non-precedenting, but it is good to just highlight that for the public for future, and just so that people are aware that every application is dealt with individually when coming to the committee. So that is just, I think, very prudent to include as well. So, sir, 3 conditions have been recommended by staff. Do you agree or understand and agree to those conditions?
I would like some clarity on the first condition.
Okay.
The 180 days, because there's going to be a fundraising effort that will need to happen, and there's also going to have to be approvals from basically the diocese for this particular project to proceed. We're not sure if 180 days is enough, but having said that, I do believe that there is basically a clause in here that we can be in communication with the Director of Development Services, and so there is, in fact, not just a 180 days limit, but a further extension possible.
Yeah,
is that correct?
I believe I'll let staff answer that question. Staff, just dealing to the 180 days.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is absolutely correct, Mr. Vandermaas, that the 180 days would be the minimum that would allow works to proceed, fundraising, as Mr. Vandermaas indicated. And then it would be subject to some communications with their director and subsequent potential beyond the 180 days time periods to coincide with the requirement to raise sufficient funds to proceed with a full site plan application and construction.
Yeah, and I don't believe it would be carved into stone, but staff is usually very understanding of that, in particular when you're working with staff. And the 180 is also, just for clarity, 180 plus the additional 20 days of the conditional if and when this is approved. So that's just for clarity as well. But you know, I believe it'd be, again, prudent just to put a date to it. If you are requesting a further amount of days, that's something that we can deal with, or we can leave it as is with that clause that's in place.
Yeah, I think it's the desire to obviously move forward with this. The 180 days is a limit, but we would like to continue to be in touch with the city, obviously, for these approvals. And I just want to turn to Father David. Is this appropriate for going forward?
It is tight, so I don't know what the procedure is if we were to ask now for an extension to that.
You're open to put forward that request. I'll ask the question to staff if that's something that they can agree to and recommend, and then the committee will deal with that request. Again, these are conditions that staff have recommended to put forward.
What is there a maximum number that?
The timeline is arbitrary. It's something that I believe this is, and again, I don't want to speak for staff. It's just good practice that they put that timeline. Sure. It becomes a norm, if you will. But there's oftentimes that is a lesser amount of days, and there's times perhaps there are more. So you could put forward your request, and then we can deal with that request as well, whether you're satisfied with the 180 or if you'd like to request an additional time frame.
Oh, through the chair?
Yes.
Through the chair to attempt to answer this question. So the decision, embedded within the decision, is an opportunity to seek an extension?
Yes.
So it's fundamentally built that way. So staff would expect if there's a need, a request would come through the planner, and but at the same time there's an expectation, it's clear from the application, there's an intent to move forward. So we would just move forward sort of as in a collegial sort of way to address the need and the approval. It's not an indeterminate approval, but or an indefinite, approval, but the measure is built into the such that you don't have to come back to the committee. And that's through the chair.
Yes, I appreciate the input.
We're certainly very happy with the positive report, and I think at this time we'd love to.
And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe the spirit is still there.
Yes,
that if there is
definitely
something, you put in the request, and the director will deal with that request, in particular if it's a reasonable request. But again, the floor is yours to either accept the 180 or put forward an alternative.
With the clarification and the discussion, it's very good to accept it at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So all recommendations, all conditions, you agree and agree to those conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions by committee members?
No, just through your chair, comment as they already understood. I'll be fine if they need an extra month or so, but given the fact we cannot put a date right now, with all your efforts, all we can do, wish you all the very best for that at this point. But if it's all agreeable, I would put forward the motion to support staff's recommendation.
Okay. Motion put forward to approve with staff's recommendations by Mr. Chadha. Seconded by Ms. Toffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and good luck.
Calling application A19-021, 257578 Ontario Inc. The property is located at 89 Clarence Street.
All right, good morning. My name is Christian Arias of Zoltan Engineering, Inc., and I'm representing the owner as the agent. Basically, this application is to vary what's shown on the Schedule C, Section 3290. Basically, what that is a sort of a site-specific zoning map, and any redevelopment to this site would require an application of this nature. And the owners at this variance is to propose a larger gas station canopy than what's shown on that schedule, and to slightly alter the landscaping. So we feel that it is a pretty minor request in nature, and hope that would be approved.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Sir, would you like to step forward?
My name is Aaron Puppy, and I represent the interests of the owners for the building behind where the gas station would be.
So again, just your full name for the record.
Aaron, A-A-R-O-N. Last name's Puppy, P-U-P-P-I.
Okay, and you're representing the interests of the owners?
The owners of 26 Stern Avenue.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do need an address from the speaker.
The address of the owners.
My home, the address of the owners would be 1550 Bailey Street. That their office is located at 1550 Bailey Street, Unit 19, Pickering, Ontario.
Okay.
Some of the objections I have. Number one would be the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring landowners. There's a Human Rights Act Protocol 1, Article 1, that not only that peaceful enjoyment of your home, but also the surrounding areas. I believe the gas station is going to have a detrimental effect. There are roughly 8 units in our low-rise apartment alone that are going to be have balconies facing a gas station. I'm not sure, there's no indication of what times the gas station would be open, but the typical gas station is open very late. We also object due to the interruption of the fabric of the area. We think it's going to stand out as an eyesore. There's quite a community of nice-looking houses and open spaces and trees in the area, and we feel this gas station is not going to fit with that fabric. There's a lot of walking and cyclists in the area. There are many schools in the area, and we don't feel that a gas station serves to promote the city objectives of encouraging cycling and public transportation. Not to mention there are 3 gas bars in the immediate vicinity within a kilometer radius. There is an impact, a detrimental impact posed by the construction of this gas bar. The residences are very close in proximity. We're not talking a major thoroughway corridor into the city. We're talking a small residential street. And we also have a concern about ground contamination in terms of not only the construction, but the contamination of having a gas bar there, again, with such a close proximity of residences surrounding.
Thank you, and fair enough. I don't know if you know it, or perhaps we can ask, the distance from your clients and whom you're representing to the property owner or to the setback, the rear yard setback. Do you know that distance? Would that
we're next door, like.
Yeah, I see that, but it looks like there's a landscape buffer between. I'm just trying to gauge what that would be.
Oh, I would say that's about maybe 3 meters.
Okay. Well, staff put forward their recommendations, and perhaps we can get some clarity on that. I appreciate your comments. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments too, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff reviewed the application against the 4 tests as outlined in the Planning Act and recommending approval subject to 3 conditions. Condition number 1, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Condition 2, that the owner finalize site plan approval under City File SP 17-094.000, execute a site plan agreement and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to staff? So I'll put forward the question that I had in terms of, do you know what that landscape buffer is between the current building that's there and I guess the residential building there? Because it looks larger, but
I'm not sure what the exact setback is. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I would say that it would be a few meters at least to the property line.
And then I put forward the question of, and I assume it is been considered in the staff's recommendations. Is there an actual ministry distance between gas bars and residential uses?
I do not believe so, no.
There is not? Okay. So that doesn't, and I haven't received anything or seen anything, no other homeowner on Clarence Street? Because truth be told, I believe the Clarence Street is greater impacted by this. There's no one that's put anything forward at this point in time?
No, we have heard from the property owner on the other side of Clarence Street, directly opposite of the site. But that distance between the front property line of that lot there and the gas bar is about 115 feet.
150 feet, okay.
It's a 23.5 meter right away.
Any other questions or comments?
If I may just offer some clarification, the Schedule C, excuse me, forms part of the bylaw, requires a 3-meter landscape strip between the property line and the building that's already there. So the landscape strip that's provided is approximately 3 meters wide.
Right. And that's the requirement that I was just earlier. I was just trying to get an understanding because the person that came forward, they're on Stern.
Correct.
And the building, from the depiction that we have here, yeah, there seems to be a rather large landscape strip between the current building and their building.
Correct. At least between excuse me, between the building and the lot line, 3 meters is about 10 feet. Excuse me. There's no change proposed to that building at this point in time. There is a slight reduction in the landscaping in this area, which is part of the variance that's being requested, but no reduction to the landscaping as it abuts the property on Stern. This is Schedule C, just for reference, not the proposed development. The proposed development is here. So you'll see a slight reduction with an increase of some parking spaces in this area, but the landscape strip abutting the property on Stern is being maintained.
Any other questions by committee members? Ms. Toffler?
Just the gentleman that came forward brought up some good points. I guess one of them would be operating hours. Are there operating hours that are established or would be established?
We do have the owner here to comment on that. Nope, I guess it's not known at this time what the operating hours would be. I guess that would be sorted out once the building project gets underway.
6 to 11:30.
Typical hours of sorts. Any other questions, Ms. Toffler?
Just in terms of the question regarding contamination, I have limited understanding of this, but this might be a question for staff in respect to the question put forward about contamination, possible contamination based on the use.
That would be at the discretion of the building department whether or not they feel that it's necessary for any type of soil investigation. At this point in time, there hasn't been any completed, I don't believe. That would be up to the discretion of the building department whether or not they feel that that's necessary.
And to add, through you, Mr. Chair, to add Ms. Doffler's comments, I'm sure there must be some sort of undertaking and some guidelines from the ministry in regards to the contamination, the possible contaminations, even though it's good, there's going to be the brand new thing. So it's more, it's in further in a better way rather than some old gas stations where we have seen exposed to some sort of contaminations and stuff.
One further question to staff as well. In past applications I've seen when close to, I guess, residential, there tends to be sound walls or of sorts. Is that something that is required in this case, or is that something that's looked at building permit stage?
There are really no real noise concerns at this time with the proposed use. The gas bar is a permitted use as of right in the zoning bylaw. The applicant is just requesting permissions to deviate from Schedule C. So at this time, we don't have any concerns from an environmental noise perspective.
Yeah, and again, I just ask it as a question, and in particular, and even though we don't really have ability to control operational hours, but I have seen, is that something that the city puts forward, or is that a ministry type, that we have a sound wall when we have these type of locations, or is there a distance that this surpasses?
If it was warranted, we certainly would be looking for some type of retaining wall or sound barrier.
Right.
In this instance, it's been determined that it's not warranted.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to verify, that it doesn't require this because of the distances that are here or in place.
Just
I might add that,
sorry, Mr. Farber, just to add to your comment there, Mr. Chair, it's actually a very good point. But I believe my understanding is there is no drive-through component on this property, so that might require sound wall or something if there's any drive-through facility. So in case I don't see any of that sort of facility, so I don't see, maybe that's why it's not required. But again, those things can be dealt at the later stage.
Mr. Farr?
Sorry, my apologies earlier for interrupting. There's a site plan requirement for this. So going through site plan, there'll be an effort to be thoughtful about the surrounding area and the design of the gas station and the lighting associated with it. As Mr. Freeman indicated, that what's being discussed here are some of the regulations associated with the zoning. The zoning fundamentally allows a gas bar, so it's not a question of whether it's permitted or not permitted. It is permitted, and site plan is the vehicle for addressing these issues. So to the extent that a person that has concerns that's bringing those forward, I think we'd like to understand those better and capture that through the site plan process.
Thank you. And I think that's a pretty important variable from my perspective in the decision making, that this is an actual right of use at this point in time. We're just dealing with the planning principles at this point and not the actual building component. But the site plan condition, I guess, that will be put forward, we'll deal with that. So any other questions? No? Then seeking a motion. If there are no, anyone else who would like to speak in the audience? Seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to support staff's recommendations.
Okay, and approve with the staff's recommendations by Mr. Chadha, seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved. Thank you. Just for clarity, there is as indicated, there is still a 20-day appeal period. So if you have any concerns, that could be at the city clerk's office. Perhaps after the meeting would be the best time, but you may be able to get information at this point in time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will be providing you with a copy of the notice of decision resulting from today, and there'll be information in the correspondence regarding the appeal process. Okay?
Thank you.
Calling application A19-040, 241-7563 Ontario, Inc. Property is located at 73 Eastern Avenue.
Good morning.
My name is Baljinder Badesha from 73 Eastern Avenue, Brampton, Ontario. We put the application for the minor variance, right? and I'm doing the business like in Brampton 28 years now, and we got the next building on 69 Eastern Avenue. As we earlier speaking, Mr. Neil said, everything else I agree with it. It's only my one concern, like in the first yard, the parking lot. Everything else is okay.
Okay, so so you've put forward the application and staff has put forward some recommendations. We'll hear their recommendations, and then if there's any concerns, we'll deal with that at that point in time. So anything else you'd like to add at this point in time?
Everything else is okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Planning staff have reviewed the minor variance application A19040 against the 4 tests of the Planning Act. Staff's recommendation is that the application is supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. First, that the motor vehicle sales use only be permitted in conjunction with a motor vehicle repair facility. 2, that no vehicles for sale or storage shall be stored in the front yard or on the city's right-of-way, shall otherwise be screened from view from the city's right-of-way, and be limited to a total area not exceeding 150 square meters. Any vehicle being parked on the city's right-of-way must be removed within 10 days of the committee's decision. That a limited site plan application shall be submitted within 60 days of the committee's decision, and that the site plan shall be approved and implemented within 60 days of the committee's final decision, or within an extended period of time as approved by the Director of Development Services. The site plan will implement the details of the associated conditions, including, but not limited to, where public and employee parking will be located, where vehicles for sale will be located, and implement landscaping and visibility screening requirements. 5, that the motor vehicle sales leasing use be limited to a period of 5 years, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval of the variance null and void.
Thank you, sir. Sir, have you had an opportunity to read those conditions?
Yes.
And you agree to those conditions?
Yes.
Okay, so just for clarity, and I'm trying to understand, so the amount of there'll be no parking in the for sale in the front.
Yes.
But it also states that in condition 4 that it will be dealt with at that point in time. Is that I wouldn't say in contradiction, but so for clarity, that at no point in time would they be able to put forward, is that, what's the rationale on that? Just more for my understanding, because if someone's trying to sell something, you oftentimes want to put at least a few visible cars, but what's the rationale there?
Right, sure. So in an industrial zone, the M2 zone, the primary use here, for example, would be the automotive repair facility. Now, what the minor variance is asking for is to be able to vary that land use to allow them the use to sell automobiles on the property. Well, the intent of the zoning bylaw is that to maintain these lands for industrial purposes, and that the sales of automotive use should be secondary to the primary use. The rationale here is that by screening those cars from public view, it will allow the site to operate as a mainly industrial purpose, so that the automotive sales doesn't become the primary use, which would not be the appropriate location as per land use requirements.
Okay. My only concern or question would be that if going through the site plan, there is discussions of potentially including it, this then precludes it from being brought forward to the front yard, if there are any, because there seems to be ample parking in the front, and that's what I'm trying to get my head around, is that by putting that condition, we're limiting the fact that you, or the applicant or whomever, can put even 1 or 2 by putting that condition in place.
That's the way that is written, yes. We're trying to limit the view from the street and the public right-of-way of vehicles for sale, but there's the property is quite large, and there's ample room behind the gate, which we're asking to be screened for those vehicles to be placed.
So just for clarity, sir, you understand the condition that they put forward and you agree to those conditions?
Yes, because we are not an auto mall, right? But we were talking earlier. So customer car parking and we sale car parking is the same thing, right? We can put like 10 cars on the front yard. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
You know?
But just for clarity, staff has recommended that no cars for sale will be in the front yard. So do you understand that condition?
I understand that. What we are asking if we can give us a permission for 10 cars on the front yard.
So you actually do want cars in the
Please,
front?
yes, if you can, yes.
Okay, so just, I want you to understand the conditions that have been put forward, because that's not what staff is recommending. So, just to be clear, there are 6 conditions. So the temporary nature, 5 years, you're good with that condition?
Yes, everything else I'm okay.
Everything else.
Yes.
There is a relatively strict condition in terms of 10 days to remove vehicles that are parked.
It's already done. That one is already done.
That has already been done?
Yes.
Okay. And you're actually looking for cars in the front?
Yes, please.
Okay, so do you understand staff's rationale? That's something that you would not want to work with? Putting the cars in the rear yard potentially?
We can do that too, no problem. But if we, for the public viewing, the car sale, they can probably see from the road. Sometimes people, they're walking around, right? So they can see easily the car parking lot is here.
Okay.
So that's my concern. Other than that,
Mr. Chado?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I understand where the city staff is coming from, and the primary use is mainly the motor vehicle repair shop. But I see there's a quite, according to this drawing, they have quite large number of cars can be parked at the front, and given the fact that this is a 5-year temporary period, and this is a standalone building, I recall my time in the previous time going into some other similar business where the units are in a condominium shared parking, and we still allowed 3 or 4 car displayed in the previous time into those sort of businesses. Over here, we have a standalone, and it does not really facing any prime major streets. So it does not, like, the whole point is the intent is not to create an eyesore for that purpose. So they have quite large number of parking. And if, let's say, we are limiting not to display the cars will be parked anyway, whether the people who work there or the people who are visiting. So after understanding all the factors, I do agree with staff that this is not the primary use, but I'm okay with 10 cars at the front.
Okay. I'm going to ask again the question. Would that be something that, again, can be dealt in at site plan, or would you still recommend putting forward that condition? Because I'm just more concerned of the fact of limiting in either direction. Ms. Corrizola?
Just to confirm, if the condition remains as recommended, then there would be no opportunity through site plan to allow for cars in the front yard.
Right.
The condition, specifically condition number 2, would need to be either amended or removed in its entirety, or some other limit imposed, if it's 5, if it's 10 vehicles in the front yard. But as recommended by planning staff, there would be no permitted vehicles to be stored in the front yard. And the vehicles, in fact, by virtue of the description in the site plan, would have to be screened from view.
Right, and that's where that's what drew my attention to it, is that the 2 conditions are somewhat combative of one another. The fact that you're potentially looking at site plan, looking at that variable, but you've now limited that variable. Is that something that, and so to be blunt, that's what I'm basically alluding to, is removing that condition and then having staff deal with that at the site plan stage.
Recognizing that would be possible, however, staff has made it clear that that is not the desired layout for this site, and they would not be supportive of that. If you intended to be supportive of that, I would recommend amending the condition and specifying specifically that is to be permitted.
And sorry, Chair, through you, I'm in support of staff's that there should be no car parked on city's right of way. That part I do agree, and but I'm okay with given the fact it's a standalone building and there's ample parking. It's not that there's no parking spot, and then at the same time, the customers will be struggling to find the parking spot and the car displayed. So by limiting 10, given the fact there was, I believe, if we count 15 or 16 on one side, and there's pretty much the same numbers on the other side. So I think it's more than enough, and we can, I'm in support of putting cars outside, and it's a 5-year temporary anyway. We can reevaluate at the later stage.
Okay, if Ms. Stoffler?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question to either the applicant or staff. There's mention of a right-of-way. Do we know how large the right-of-way is, the city right-of-way? We have a site plan here. It's a hand-sketched site plan, but it doesn't indicate where the right-of-way would be. Do we know if that's 2 meters, 5 meters, just even roughly? Or does it take up half of what is shown as the front lot?
I understand your point, and just for clarity, in the depiction, are there any cars that are depicted in the right-of-way, or that's difficult to gauge?
Just for clarity, I can't confirm one way or another, but it certainly appears as though the sketch that's been provided to you, although there's no setback indicated to the building, goes right to the street curb, that they have included the city's right-of-way in this sketch. Because just looking at it in an air photo, it appears that there's actually a lot less room between the front lot line and the building than would be shown on this sketch.
Okay, sir?
Yeah. There was only one car by that time when Neil Chada was there. So we moved that one, and I told them this summer we can put some grass on the front line there. There's no right of way to the city, right? So we can clear that.
But I guess just for our clarity, does the city have an actual numeric number of what that right-of-way is, so that
at this point, no, we would need to see a survey of the property as part of the site plan submission, and then the front lot line can be established as a factor of a setback from that building. Anything beyond the front lot line is the city's right-of-way and must be landscaped.
Okay, and I understand where I'm just trying to get my head of, do we not know where the lot line is currently and what the setback would be currently from?
I do not have access to a copy of the survey of the property to provide that or confirm that information. Okay. The applicant would need to provide that to the city.
Okay.
Well, through you, Chair, according to this drawing, it's, the length of your property is approximately 350 feet.
Deep, yes.
So, I'm sure if this drawing has shown, according to that, all these shown parking is definitely under their property, not...
Yeah, I'm just trying to answer Ms. Doppler's point of what the actual right-of-way would be. Is it 1 meter? Is it 2 meters? Is it...
Maximum 3 meters, or more than 2 meters. Okay.
But
only one car was parked there.
So we don't have an accurate depiction at this point in time. So,
through you, Mr. Chair, just my question for that is understanding how much space there is. It's a very large property. There are a lot of cars that can be parked there. Right now, they're a little bit tight in how they're parked. My concern is if I were coming to this facility and I would have to drive through a gate to park my car, especially as a female, you don't like to drive through a gate if you don't quite know where you're going. So if there were an opportunity to allow for some parking, at least along the length of the building that is in front of the gate, it would just be a practical suggestion.
And if I could just confirm in that regard, as soon as you get to the front wall of the building and beyond the front wall, that's not the front yard any longer. That's the interior side yard. We're only talking about cars that are parked between the front face of the building and the front lot line. And there may be some room, to tandem a few cars in there, maybe 6 or 8. And then on the other side, there may be room for 2 or 3 more. But anything down in front of the sidewall of the building is where cars may be parked, because that's the interior side yard.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for the clarity there. Okay. Any other questions? I guess I leave it to the floor for a motion to proceed. So, sir, just for clarity, you do understand and agree to all the conditions that have been put forward by staff except for the actual amount of parking you would there. And Ms. Cordizola?
Sorry, I'm also just going to note, if you are considering allowing cars to park in the front yard or amending that condition, there's also going to be a need to amend the requirement for screening, because fencing is not permitted in the front yard in an industrial zone. So if the cars are permitted to be parked there, they will not be screened, because fencing would not be permitted in front of them without the approval of a subsequent variance.
Through you, Chair, if staff can help with potentially the proper wording, if in case 10 cars can be allowed at the front.
10 cars permitted at the front without being screened is the request of committee. If that's the case, I would suggest amending condition 2 to state that no vehicles for sale or storage shall be located on the city's right-of-way, and a maximum of 10 vehicles shall be permitted in the front yard.
So just for the clarity, through you, Mr. Chair, the total 10 vehicle, including the visitor vehicles, are the total for display, because according to this drawing, I can see there's like both sides, there's ample parking spots as indicated on this drawing.
Correct. So again, to ensure that it's 10 vehicles for sale, if that's the intent, it would be that a maximum of 10 vehicles offered for sale may be displayed in the front yard. And I would again suggest that limited to a total maximum area not to exceed 150 square meters, which is what the staff is recommending as a total area for which vehicles for sale can be displayed on this property in its entirety, not just the front yard.
I would ask here for clarity, manager of zoning. Does the variances as they're written preclude visitor parking, customer parking in the front area that is currently prohibited? That's a question for the zoning manager.
It doesn't preclude, through you, Mr. Chair, it doesn't preclude visitor parking in the front yard. What it permits is that those parking spaces may be used for display purposes if there are, and to a maximum of 10. So if there are only 2, there may be some available for visitors. If there are less than, or if there are up to 10 and there's only 10 available parking spaces, then yes, that would occupy all of the required visitor spaces in that area. Bearing in mind that the requirement for parking the building in its entirety would still need to be provided on this site. We're only talking about the area between the front wall of the building and the front property line.
Okay. So the premise that planning staff have put forward is that the primary use of the site is an industrial use. The notion here was not to allow vehicle sales in the front yard, which would start to muddy the water as to what the primary use of the site was. Staff are supportive of customers, employees being able to park in the front area, but not storing vehicles for sale. There can be signage indicating vehicles are for sale. Someone comes into the business and then can go and view those cars beyond the screening wall. So that, just to be very clear, was the intent. And the issue is that once cars are permitted for sale to be parked in the front yard, it now becomes a compliance management issue. And that's not something staff want to proceed with. And just as a note, it's quite common when these types of proposals come up to not allow display at all, or display only in the building. So it's just some additional context.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand staff's perspective on this. In the very similar area, in the past, I personally visited the properties within a condominium where the different units are available, and very tiny, tight parking where each unit allowed minimum 3, 4, 5 number of parking spots. And roughly around 2 years back, I think we were allowing them to conduct the same practice and allowing 3 or 4 vehicles to display. I do understand where staff is coming from, but at the same time, this is a standalone building. They have parking spots inside and out. This is not something a plaza or where like 3, 4 the similar usage are being operated, so the customer can be drawn. So my only intention is to just for the sake of the business point of view, that's all I'm suggesting here at this point, that the 10 parking spots, if we have already 16 on one side according to this drawing and roughly around 12 or 13 on another side at the front, even if one side, roughly around 10 parking spots for the display is allowed, I'm sure there is a good number of vehicles can be parked for the customers, or maybe their own the people who work there, they can park at the back. So at least if the person is responsible to run his own business, I'm sure they will conduct that properly. And according to the condition number 4, those signage are required for all the employee parking and the public parking. So that's what my intent is at this point.
Can I ask Ms. Corzola a question? Because in talking something, so just for clarity, when you mentioned the front yard as opposed to interior side yard, is that if that fence was pushed forward, technically it becomes part of it would become in compliance from what the conditions that it would be put. So the rationale that I'm actually, as I'm talking through this, is the fact that, to Ms. Stoffler's point, is that I think we're muddying the waters by actually putting that, because it can be complied with by moving the fence, but then you're actually making it more visually unappealing from my perspective. Is that an accurate statement in terms of compliance from your point of view? Because the cars that are depicted, if you will, on that interior side yard, if a fence was moved forward, whatever that distance is, 30 feet, you don't have a copy, Ms. Corzola?
I do. I'm trying to put it on the screen just for reference. Apologize.
No.
So the fence does come partway back at this point in time. So you're suggesting relocating the fence up to the front face of the building?
No, I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying that if from the way that it's stated currently, if that was moved to the front, then that would comply with the recommendations that staff, to an extent. What I'm getting at is those cars that are now currently there would then be in compliance if they were screened.
Correct. So any cars that are beyond, this point would be in the interior side yard. So this is all interior side yard. They would not be subject to the condition that they can't be located in the front yard, but they would be required to be screened from view. So we're really talking about the parking spaces up in this area. So anywhere between here and the front lot line, there are a number of spaces depicted on there. They're really just rectangles on a plan. I do not believe that they will get anywhere close to the number of spaces that are identified on that plan. When I'm looking at it, I'm thinking you might get a maximum of 9 spaces here and another 3 over here in order to meet that requirement in the front yard. And because you cannot put the fence in front of the building in any way, all of those cars will be visible from the street.
Yeah, and I understand the rationale even more so now as we've talked through it. However, I think that's, and oftentimes we have that front yard and interior side yard are confused. Therefore, I think, to Mr. Chada's point, is that just by allowing the amount of cars there. Now, I don't know if the wording can be modified, because the front yard and the side yard, because I think you are right. By putting them all in the front yard, you're heavy loading the front yard as opposed to, so perhaps a greater indicator would be as interior and front yard, including that, the 10 to be stored in the front and side yard don't need to be screened outside of the current fence. Because I don't want to make the situation more onerous, but at the same time, from the current and from staff's perspective, I don't believe 10 cars in particular, if, to your point of, if there are only 18 spots there, or whatever the number is, then it would be more loaded than it should be. But at the same time, I think that both applicant and the public wouldn't even recognize the difference between front and interior yard at this point. And so I would ask for our friendly amendments to include the front and interior side yard that are currently beyond the fence, or however the verbiage can be put forward in that sense.
Okay,
Do you understand?
May offer, I believe I do. Let me try to articulate for your consideration. The condition I believe you're suggesting is that, and just to clarify, you're looking at a maximum of 10 cars for sale on the entire property, or just in front of the fence?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, to the staff, yes, I'm looking for maximum 10 cars for sale display just outside of the fence.
Outside of the fence. So if I may offer, condition 2 be amended to state that no vehicles for sale or storage shall be located on the city's right-of-way, and a maximum 10 vehicles for sale may be displayed in front of the existing fence, between the fence and the front lot line, and that the total area divided to vehicle sales on the site shall not exceed 150 square meters.
Is that fair, Mr. Chadha?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so the motion then would read as indicated from Ms. Corazzola for condition 2, and all other conditions remain as they are put forward by staff?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, to the staff, I just want to reconfirm by amending second condition, is there any possible change staff suggest to any of the condition? Or all need to go?
I would defer to planning staff with respect to condition 4 and the requirement for visibility screening requirements. If that requirement is meant to now only apply to vehicles that are stored behind the fence, it might be helpful if that condition were amended to state that specifically.
Mr. Farr? I know the spirit of what you're trying to accomplish isn't there.
Sure.
I guess.
Well, it's a little different animal now. The intent originally was to screen vehicles that were offered for sale. Just conferring through the chair with Neil. I think that we need to saw it off, I guess, to achieve whatever aesthetic improvement is gained from screening that portion of the property used for storage and other whatever site-related work. That may be a middle ground. So to that end, we would just say, okay, so the no vehicles for sale, I guess it's all changing. Is anybody working on a condition over here? Or no one's working on a condition right now? So that no vehicles are for sale or storage shall be stored in the front yard or in the...
Sorry, that is a condition that has been established. It's condition 4
right.
that we're looking at now, so there's no requirement in the newly amended condition for screening of the vehicles that will be located between the fence and the front lot line. The only change is whether condition 4 in the last line, which says that where vehicles will be located in implementing landscaping and visibility screening requirements.
It doesn't need to change.
You're comfortable with that? And I guess that was the question from Mr.
That was the
Chadha,
question.
if anything needed to be amended by that. So that meets the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. So to be clear, Mr. Chadha, and for Ms. Meyer's sanity, is the fact that all conditions remain the same with the exception of condition 2 as stated by Ms. Corazzola. Ms. Myers, you're comfortable with that? Okay. So that's tabled.
That's my motion, yeah.
Okay. Do we have a seconder on that? Seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. So, sir, those that is approved with the modified condition for condition number 2.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Calling application A19041, Sarbjit and Amadeep Sahal. Property is located at 15 Bedouin Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Marlon De Silva. I'm representing, excuse me, Mr. Sarbjit Sahal. I actually am also an employee of the builder. I'm the general manager for Mosaic Homes. We built the home on this property.
Okay.
And during the purchase, the purchasers, Mr. Sarbjeet and Amandeep Sahal, as an upgrade, they purchased a side door entrance, which leads into a mudroom slash kind of a service area in the home. But with that being built, we needed to add a side deck for access because of the grading condition. That's why we're applying for the minor variance of the setback being 0.34.
Okay.
So I've seen the conditions, the recommendations by the city members. Some of these, so there's a permit already on the home, so I'm assuming that permit would just need to be revised to include the side deck. Because, like I said, we built the home, so there's a permit on this home already. In terms of the drainage, the city officials, I've already been on site and met and done exterior finals. The lots have been certified, so drainage is not an issue there, and the deck was already in place.
Okay, so we'll get some clarity from staff on
Sure.
that if we can.
Sure.
And understanding where the train of thought is as well. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Planning staff have reviewed the minor variance application A19-041 against the 4 tests of the Planning Act. Staff recommendation is that, staff's recommendation is approval based upon the following recommended conditions. First, that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the attached sketch to the public notice. Permit be obtained for the existing above-grade side door, including the staircases and landing, within 60 days of the decision of approval. That the applicant shall consult with the City of Brampton for a side yard drainage design that ensures that the drainage from the applicant's side yard shall follow approved drainage designs for the property, be unobstructed by the proposed landing and steps, and shall be directed onto the subject property and not impact the abutting property. And the applicant shall obtain a written approval to this effect to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering Services within 30 days of the decision of the approval of the committee. 4, that the above-grade side entrance shall not be used to access an unregistered secondary unit. 5, that the above-grade side entrance shall not be used as a principal entrance for a registered second unit, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
So, I don't know if anyone else has to answer the question of the building permit. Would there just be a revision that is required or an additional permit?
I suspect it will be a new permit. The permit for the home would have been closed. If it's not closed, then there's a potential to revise that permit. But I would recommend that the applicant consult with the building division as to the appropriate mechanism for filing a building permit application.
Fair enough, in the sense of, if there was something, nothing has changed, so therefore something would just need to be clarified. And I think that somewhat answers the grading aspect as well, is that if nothing has changed, then someone will just have to verify that it is as is, and everyone's comfortable with that. But
I do just want to confirm that the side entrance was not shown on the original building permit application. So the building permit application was not, or rather the side entrance was not reviewed as part of the construction of the original building.
Okay, and correct. And I want to also highlight that you stressed to the applicant that conditions 4 and 5 are relatively clear, that if and when they, sometimes someone may change their minds or look for a permit or whatever the case for a secondary or an accessory unit, that these highlight the fact that those are not allowed, and if they are allowed and that permit is obtained, then that is not a primary entrance. So
yeah, they're fully aware, and even if they wanted to do that, very limited to be able to do
just
that.
wanted to make that clear, because on my site inspection, I did find it odd because I saw that looked very much so like not something that was different. It looked like a builder's deck. So I found it odd that it was actually being sought for a variance, because it looked like it was there from the onset.
It was actually brought forward to us by the one of the city inspectors, when I was doing exterior files, and he put forward.
Caught the fact that that wasn't on the drawing.
That's right. So he brought forward for us to apply for the minor variance, and then I had to go meet with the actual purchasers and get their authorization to represent them here today.
So our city is doing a great job then.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Mr. Chadha?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's what I was gonna ask about, that how it came, because I see the family is living there and builder is still representing for this, and I don't see this, by looking at the construction, I don't see that that is something got done after moving into, because you can see from the cut of the brick and the size of the deck. In fact, the AC is right behind these steps. Otherwise, I'm always in support of, step up and then landing and step down kind of things for access to the backyard. It's a corner property. There is access from another side. It's a detached property. But that is something, overall, I'm in support of staff's recommendation, but I'm not really happy at builder's point of view. It's not getting included in the original drawings and by the time the house got built. So that was my concern in regards to that.
If I may add to that, the reason why it wasn't on the original site plan and part of the original permit is when we applied for permit and site plan for that lot, the lot wasn't sold. It was sold after the fact, and then we go through a structural period of upgrades, and then we go through design for colors and interior, and the homeowner wanted the side door entrance at the structural stage, which is why it wasn't on the original site plan. And we revised the site plan indicating, showing the actual side deck entrance.
Through you, Chair, I understand, and I remember the few corner lots got sold after by all the rest of the other lots, so I do recall that.
Hardest lost to sell at
Yes,
the corners.
yes, yes.
Any other questions or
Nope.
concerns? So again, just for clarity, you understand and agree to the conditions as put forward by staff?
Yes.
Okay. Seeking a motion to proceed. Motion to approve by Ms. Doffler as indicated.
Staff's recommendation.
With staff's recommendations as indicated.
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. That is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Calling application A19042, Karminder and Ranjit Nisar. The property is located at 1 Dawes Road.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Dell. I'm the authorization for the owners of this application. Originally, I had been hired to process a setback to a as-built, I should say, after-the-fact basement walkout. Upon a site visit by staff, they noted that there was also a deck in the rear yard that needed to be captured. We amended the application and have captured and are here before you for 2 variances that we believe are accurate. And I think, given the support of staff comments, it's quite clear that what we're asking for conforms to the 4 tests. So I'd be happy to answer any further questions if you have.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Planning staff have reviewed the minor variance application A19-042. Staff staff have proposed the following recommendations of approval. First, that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the sketch of the attached public notice. That the below-grade entrance shall not be used to access an unregistered second unit. That drainage from the deck shall flow onto the subject property and therefore shall not adversely affect the adjacent properties. That the owner obtain a building permit for both the below-grade entrance and deck within 60 days of the date of the committee's final decision, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Sir, you've had an opportunity to review those conditions. They are agreeable to you?
I have, and my client has instructed me to agree.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Seeking a motion to proceed if there are no further questions. Motion to approve with the staff recommended conditions by Ms. Doffler, seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff.
Calling application A19044, Caniff Properties Limited. Property is located at 8265 Financial Drive.
Hello, members of the committee.
Good morning, sir.
How are you all doing? My name is Bruce McCall Richmond, and I'm a planner with Glen Sharon Associates. I've been retained by Kneff Properties Limited, owners of the property at 8205 Financial Drive. It's also known as the Lionhead Marketplace. It's currently under construction. As noted by Jeannie, the overall property has a site area of approximately 7.64 hectares. The purpose of my application is to seek the committee's permission to allow for a Dogtopia daycare, grooming and overnight boarding establishment, or a kennel, to operate in Building B of the Commercial Plaza. Building B is one of many units within the overall plaza and is located on the property's east side and has a total internal area of approximately 412 square meters. It shares one demising wall with adjacent unit B1. Just to give a bit of background on Dogtopia for your information, they provide for dog grooming, last-minute emergency dog care services, and overnight boarding when required. According to Dogtopia, last-minute dog daycare has proven to be an in-demand and heavily utilized service in many communities. And as outlined in my cover letter, Dogtopia conducts extensive unit renovations before occupying any new premises. Sound control measures are implemented through the installation of special wall, floor, and roof types, and proactive measures are used by staff to reduce barking through engagement activities and timeouts. And odors are managed through separate HVAC systems. They each have a separate air intake. Rooms are temperature and humidity controlled and are cleaned at a minimum 3 times daily, all with the intention of limiting or reducing any impacts on adjacent units. So I'm sure you did read the staff report. I won't go on any further, but thank you for considering this application for minor variance. I'd be happy to provide any additional details or answer any questions in relation to Dogtopia's business operations.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe everything is quite thorough. We deal with these ongoing. The question to staff is this one of the, we're dealing with a zoning review. Are these one of the discussion points that we're looking at this point in time?
Certainly is, yeah. One of the many new uses that we're looking at incorporating in.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The staff is of the view that application A19-044 is supportable subject to a number of conditions. I would like to highlight here that staff, after the staff report was circulated, staff have brought up an updated set of conditions, which are in fact 7 in number. So I'll read them. Condition number 1, that the kennel or dog care, dog daycare and overnight boarding be approved to operate only from Building B, as indicated in the sketch attached to the public notice. Number 2, that the kennel in association with the dog grooming facility be limited to a maximum gross floor area of 320 square meters. Condition number 3, that there be no outdoor dog runs associated with the kennel, overnight boarding of household pets that do not require veterinary services. Condition number 4, that the applicant shall implement the noise mitigation measures as indicated in the application and submit a noise certificate completed by a noise engineer to the satisfaction of the Public Works and Engineering Department within a period of 90 days of the date of decision of the committee, or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Planning and Development Services upon receipt of a written request from the owner. Condition number 5, that the applicant obtain the required kennel license within 60 days of the final date of the decision of the committee and prior to the establishment of the overnight boarding use. Condition number 6, that the applicant obtain any building permit, including unit finish, as required prior to the establishment of the overnight boarding use. And condition number 7, that failure to comply with and maintain any of the conditions of the committee will render the temporary approval null and void. I would actually like to correct that it's not temporary, so this should be, the word temporary, I would say, would need to be crossed out. So the last part would be the failure to comply with and maintain any of the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, have you had an opportunity to review those amended conditions?
I have, well, other than
listening.
Other than listening.
And just for clarity from question of staff, and I understand it because it was something that I was thinking. This mainly, the first aspect pertains to the unit in question. That's where the square footage comes into place, so that it's occupying the unit that is being sought or has been leased by your client.
That's correct,
so
yeah.
that's the spirit of that. Any additional ones? Did that come forward for any specific?
Yeah, another aspect was that staff also wanted to bring the recommended conditions in line with the conditions which the committee has previously approved for similar applications.
Okay.
So basically these two considerations.
So I am fine with the conditions, thank you. Just I am a bit concerned about the specific wording. If there's an opportunity that I could just read them quickly.
Yes, please.
Because I have,
yeah.
I'm sure it's fine, but if I could just
Yeah,
have
no, that's fair enough.
Okay, if you give me a moment.
Yes,
Okay.
Give me an opportunity to have a glass of water.
Thank you very much.
I was waiting for the right moment.
Thank you, Chair. I am fine with the conditions.
Okay. So if there are no further questions or concerns, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the
Staff recommended conditions. Seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. That is approved.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Calling application A19046, Amarjeet and Kalmanjeet Man. The property is located at number 8 Ray Avenue.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gabriel Frasson, Murata Design. I'm the agent for Amarjeet and Kalmanjeet Man. What we're requesting is, first of all, 8 Ray Avenue is on an estate lot, so it's a fairly large lot, and we're asking for a slightly larger a variance on the size of the gazebo and service shed, where the restrictions would be 23 square meters. We're asking for 32 for both, with a combined 64 square meter area, where 40 square meters would be the norm. So, the other thing that I would like to bring forward was the rear of the property has pipelines running through it. So our original submission had the shed at the rear of the property on top of the easements. So I've modified the submission to relocate the shed to closer to the house. But we are in contact with TransCanada and Enbridge and would like to actually, with their blessing, to be able to relocate the shed back to our original submission. But I don't think it's not a variance issue, but I just wanted to bring that to note.
And I did notice that, I guess the cross-section lines indicate the easement.
The easement is quite large. It's 30 meters, and there's 2 pipelines on the back of the property. But I did have a meeting with Leslie from TransCanada yesterday, outlining our desires. We also were looking to install a basketball court. But we wanted to see if there was any issues with that. And they didn't seem to be issues, but we know that we have to go through their approval process.
Right. And then I guess we'll leave it to staff if I don't believe so. If there are any, there are. Okay, so we'll have that conversation when staff puts forward their recommendations so that you're clear as well. Okay. Any other information?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Any questions to the agent by committee members? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Mr. Chair, planning staff have reviewed the minor variance application against the 4 tests of the Planning Act. Staff recommendation is that the application A19-046 is supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. First, that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. That the building permit be obtained for all accessory structures greater than 10 square meters. That the proposed gazebo be of an open style construction. That failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. And I just a couple of questions. Firstly, to the agent, the existing sheds that are there are to be removed from
that is correct. Once we gain approval, we would remove the existing sheds.
And then I ask it to staff. I know sometimes we put those conditions in there that they will be removed. Is it? I don't believe it's necessary because it's an 8 in terms of square footage and so forth. But just wanted to highlight that I noticed that there were sheds already there that will be removed. So just as a question or just as a comment, Ms. Corazzola.
It's certainly the committee's prerogative to require that they be removed. If they were to remain, then that would trigger additional variances. Right now, the variance is only to permit the size and location of the 2 proposed accessory structures. I do want to comment on the suggestion that they might be placed back on the easement, and certainly when the application originally came in, it was identified as a variance because the structures were shown to be located on the easement itself, and the bylaw does prohibit the erection of accessory structures on an easement. So because the application was amended and the structures were located outside the easement, that variance had not been part of the notification or the variances sought before this committee today. So if the variance is to approve the 2 accessory structures in the size, and if you are looking at the condition or looking to endorse the condition recommended by council, by staff rather, that the location be generally in accordance with the sketch, if you're looking to eliminate that condition, any placement of those accessory structures on an easement will require further application for variance back to this committee.
Okay, so I guess to your point, perhaps that's more of a question to the agent, understanding the fact that if then your desire to shift would potentially trigger a...
And we're okay with that.
Okay.
We because we don't have any idea of our approval status with Enbridge or TransCanada. So at least we have an opportunity to build the structures outside of the easement.
And I think Ms. Corazzola's point is that
yes,
in the event that would
of that.
be is that, the assumption that there wouldn't be, I guess we've clarified that there would be something further and would potentially need, or not potentially, would actually need a further variance in the future if that's sought.
We're aware of that.
Okay, yes. And I just wanted to highlight, and I don't think it's necessary to put in a form of conditions that those.
Yes.
And it's depicted in the actual sketch anyway that they are that they're existing, but in particular with the scope of the home being built, I don't believe that would be an issue at that point in time anyway. So just wanted to highlight that square footage would probably bring you over, but I'm not sure at that point.
Yes, it would probably.
Okay. So if there are no further points, taking a motion to proceed. Counselor? Motion to approve with staff's recommended conditions? Seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling applications A19047 and A19048. We have Block 47 and Block 56 on Summerbeam Way.
Good morning.
My name is Jennifer Spalton. I'm with Glenshire Associates, Inc. We are the planning consultants for both applications A19047 and A19048. I was going to request that the applications be dealt with together, but it sounds like by the introduction that that's what I'm being permitted to do. The minor variances we are requesting today pertain to Block 46 of Plan 43M 2050, owned by Ashley Oaks Homes, Inc., and Block 56 of Plan 43M 2029, owned by Scottish Heather Developments, Inc. The lands are intended to accommodate 31 2- and 3-story townhomes on a common element condominium road. With regard to Block 56 and the minor variances we are requesting, due to the unique geometry and in order to accommodate appropriate and comfortable unit widths of 6 meters and greater, the owner is unable to accommodate a minimum landscaped open space area of 4.5 meters in only one instance for the lot abutting Rivermont Road. So as such, we are proposing the following variance: to allow a minimum landscaped open space area of 2.7 meters, whereas 4.5 meters is required, where a lot abuts a public road. And with respect to the variances we are requesting for Block 47, due to the detailed design and site layout, the owner is unable to accommodate the minimum lot area in all instances. The proposed site plan layout offers a variety of unit sizes while still offering adequate lot sizes and outdoor amenity areas. As such, we are requesting the following variances for Block 47: to allow a minimum lot area of 125 square meters and greater, whereas a minimum of 150 square meters is required, and to allow the second story of a townhouse dwelling unit to be located 4.3 meters closer to the rear lot line than the second story wall of the abutting dwelling unit, whereas 3 meters is the maximum. In my opinion, both variances meet the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, as the lands are zoned for medium-density residential, which permit townhouse dwellings. I also believe the variances are minor in nature, and relief is only required in a few instances, whereas the rest of the site plan conforms to zoning requirements. I've reviewed the staff comments and conditions, and I agree with them. I don't have any concerns.
Committee members, any questions for the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on these applications? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am the planner that's been assigned the current site plan application submission, and that site plan encompasses both blocks that comprise the entire property. And it was through the second submission site plan that these variances were identified. So based on the 4 tests, Mr. Chairman, staff is recommending approval of both A19047 and A19048, and the conditions, the recommended conditions of approval are identical for both, Mr. Chair. 1, that the owner finalize site plan approval under City File SP 18-035, execute a site plan agreement, and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services. 2, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown in the sketch attached to the public notice. And finally, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. So, as indicated, you agree and understand and agree to those conditions?
Yes.
Okay. If there are no further questions or concerns, seeking a motion to proceed. Motion to approve both applications by Ms. Doppler with staff recommended conditions.
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That carries. They are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A17107, Anointed Chapel, located at 1 Lowry Drive.
morning, Mr. Chair, committee members, secretaries, treasurer, and you are supporting city members. This application is quite old. The first time it was heard was in August 2017, and subsequently it was heard in August 1st, 2017, July 10, 2018, and we were working closely with the city and fulfilling their requests and requirements of submitting D6 compatibility study and traffic impact and parking study. This is a change of use application in standalone industrial building as per the city policies of permitting such uses in industrial zones. So I have gone through the conditions, staff report, condition, and we agree to those conditions, but there are certain points, the timings that I would like to request some changes.
Okay. We'll deal with that once staff has had an opportunity to put forward their recommendations, if that's okay. Anything further, sir? Okay. Committee members, any questions for the agent? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Sir, would you like to come forward? Sir, if you'd just like to step aside one moment.
Thank you for hearing me today. I'm William Bettridge. I own Brampton Sheet Metal and Intercare. And
just the address for the record, sir.
I'm sorry?
Just your address or your...
Oh, 5 Lowry.
Okay.
2 doors down from this place of worship.
And just full name, just sorry for the record.
My full name?
Full name, sorry.
William Harry Bettridge.
Thank you. Just the spelling on the last name?
Betty without the Y, ridge on the end. Bettridge.
Thank you.
We've been in business in Brampton now for 100 years, providing jobs. I purchased 1 Lowry because it provided the parking and building size that I needed to run my business, and it being a business park for commercial and industrial buildings. The building right across the road from me was purchased by a mosque in Lowry, and we had to pay somebody to control the parking and what have you, because it's just rampant. It takes a police car every Friday to help control the parking and what have you on the street. They just take over the entire complex. A good friend of mine, Bill Christie, had built Pinehurst Woodworking on Reagan Road, just a couple doors to the north of Lowry. And I had the cause to drive down past that when they were worshiping. And they have one of the largest parking lots in the entire area. It was full, the street was full. It was down to 1-lane traffic, traveling very slow, doors were opening. It was a real dangerous, hazardous to just be able to get through there. I think places of worship have a need for small buildings, large buildings, but these buildings in this industrial complex have not been designed for the parking requirements of a parish. Right? I don't know what to call it. You have to excuse me on that one. And I'm just here to object that they're even allowed to carry on practicing religion, and they just don't have the parking for it. There isn't the infrastructure to support it. When we have to bring in the police to control, when I have the mosque across the street, God bless them, actually send somebody over with pylons to control their own parishioners from taking over my entire building. Okay, so I object.
And that will be put forward in the record. Perhaps then when staff puts forward their recommendations, they can speak to the actual parking on this specific site.
Yeah, it's just one more, it's just gonna be awful.
Okay.
It's awful now.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is of the view that application A17-017 is supportable, subject to a number of actually 11 conditions. Condition number 1 is that the following accessory uses to a place of worship shall not be permitted, and these include a private school, a nursery, a daycare, an outdoor play or activity area, after-school programs, and residential accommodation or dwelling units. Condition number 2, that all public activities shall be conducted within the building and no outdoor activities shall take place at any time. Condition number 3, that there shall be no outside storage of goods and materials associated with the activities at this place of worship. Condition number 4, that the worship area shall be limited to a maximum gross floor area of 725 square meters. Condition number 5, that a minimum of 58 parking spaces shall be provided for the proposed place of worship. Condition number 6, that a grading and servicing plan and a stormwater management report must be approved by the Public Works and Engineering Department prior to construction. Condition number 7, that an updated study shall be submitted to the satisfaction of the Public Works and Engineering Department of the City of Brampton within 30 days of the date of decision of the committee, quantifying the potential impact of 3 facilities of potential concerns identified in the D6 Compatibility Assessment Report dated June 4, 2018, and these facilities include the Safety Clean located at 25 Reagan Road, Econ Construction Limited located at 12 Cannon Crescent, and Unirem Plastics Limited located at 3 Lowry's Drive. The following data will be required within the study to inform the need for mitigation measures on the proposed place of worship. Number 1, that odor readings readings taken at the property line, north, west, and south of the property lines over a period of 7 days to capture the variation and maxima in odor readings during operational cycles of these facilities. Condition number 2, point number 2, that noise readings taken at the property line, north, west, and south property lines over a period of 7 days to capture the variation and maxima in noise levels during operational cycles of these facilities. Condition number 8, that a building permit for a change of use to a place of worship shall be obtained within 90 days of the date of decision of the committee or as extended at the discretion of the chief building official at the City of Brampton. Condition number 9, that is site plan basic review stream approval be obtained for the proposed use within 120 days of the date of decision of the committee or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services at the City of Brampton upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. The review of the site plan application shall include, but not limited to, the following: A, grading and site servicing plan; B, stormwater management report; C, landscape plan, including a 3-meter wide landscape buffer along the adjacent roads, a 1.2 meter chain link fence along the property line adjacent to the existing development, existing trees on site, and additional trees and shrub plantings to compensate for the loss of soft landscape area to accommodate the additional parking. And the plan would need to be stamped by a landscape architect. Condition number D, point number D, that mitigation measures for odor and noise identified from a review of the study required under condition number 7. E, that execution of a site plan agreement and payment of appropriate securities to the city. Condition number 10, that should a use on the surrounding properties within a 300-meter radius from the property boundary of 1 Lottery Drive changed to a more impactful use allowed under the zoning bylaw, the applicant will be required to update the D6 compatibility study for 1 Lottery Drive and adjust environmental mitigation measures as may be necessary at the proposed place of worship on 1 Lottery Drive. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the variance null and void. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So I just want to get some clarity from the site plan that's depicted here and in the conditions that are put forward. So to be clear, is those additional parking spots that are being put forward? And how many are those?
That is correct. In the front of the building towards Lowry Drive, there are existing 26 parking spaces right now. We are proposing to add 32 parking spaces towards south, back of the building. So total parking will be 58 numbers required, which is also recommended in the staff report as well as in our parking study and the traffic study that were submitted and were approved.
Okay. Yeah, and this has been quite lengthy, so I do see that staff has put numerous conditions on there. So just to be clear, sir, and I'll actually have, before I ask you which ones you potentially are looking to amend, are there any questions from committee members?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question to the applicant. How long has the church occupied this building?
Now around 2 years.
Around 2 years?
Yeah.
And
because we were in the process of getting a minor variance since I understand July 2017. So meanwhile we were there.
And what days of the week is the building used?
Mostly on weekends. But
Saturdays
evening time,
and-
sometime evening time also during the weekdays.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions by other committee members? Seeing none. Sir, which...
So there is some little mismatch in the condition. I have no objection to the conditions, but there's certain little corrections. Condition number 7, that an updated study shall be submitted to the satisfaction of Public Works Engineering Department of City within 30 days of date of decision. Subsequent to this, within same condition, point number 1 and 2, which require us to get the readings for 7 days within this period. It is highly difficult to hire a consultant, get the study done within 7 days, and submit the report within 30 days.
Understood.
So I would request you to, if committee can extend this to 60 days.
Okay.
Which is quite reasonable. Secondly, within this same condition, point number 1 and 2, we are required to get the readings for 7 days. Normally the readings are taken over a period of 5 days, Monday to Friday, within 1 week. If it goes in the second week, then it makes no sense. Standard practice is to get it 5 days. We can get sufficient data within 5 days. So I request you to bring it down to 5 days instead of 7 days, if possible.
Okay.
And the next condition, which is condition number 8, also has given us the 90 days time for getting the building permit for change of use. I understand that we are also subjected to get a site plan approval in the basic review stream, which I understand is called fast track, and which is not a full site plan approval process. And it looks like that requirements are of full site plan approval, because grading plan, servicing plan, stormwater management, landscape by OLA member, mitigation measure as described above, and site plan agreement, which is always there. So I need to understand if it's a full site plan approval procedure or a fast track site plan approval procedure, which planner calls basic review stream.
Okay. So I'll have staff speak to these. I'll just chime in quickly before staff even speaks to I believe the first request of 30 to 60 is reasonable unless something changes my mind when staff speaks. The 7-day cycle I think is actually a fair cycle, because I want to clearly indicate the 7-day cycle, in particular on weekends. There may be other variables that are occurring there. So I think that's fair, but that's, again, just my initial thought. And the 90 days, again, as we've had discussions in the past, the clause of it can be extended by the director, I think potentially takes care of that. If it's full in play, it protects somewhat both parties, but again, you're open to making that request. Staff,
if I may just speak to the building permit timing.
Yeah.
I do note that 120 days, and again, that may be extended, have been provided to obtain site plan approval.
Right.
And I can also confirm that a building permit cannot be issued until site plan approval is obtained. So to suggest that somehow the building permit has to be issued before site plan approval, I think is misleading. It might be appropriate to amend the condition rather than imposing that 90 days from the date of the committee's decision, rather than imposing it as 90 days from the date of site plan approval.
Okay. Any comments on it?
Or perhaps even less than that, because the use is already occupying the building without the benefit of a permit. So I would suggest that from the time site plan approval is received, that within 60 days, a building permit should be obtained.
That's acceptable.
Okay. And speaking to the other requests?
I have no comment on the other requests.
Okay. Any other staff request or comments on the other requests?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to the other time extension that the applicant has indicated, the 60 days request that he is making with regard to condition number 7, the staff is in support of extending the period from 30 days to 60 days for the study to be updated. And with regard to the length of the cycle during which the odor and noise-related readings are to be obtained, staff would still recommend 7 days, because this is the duration which the study has recommended. And staff does not have any objection to changing the building permit time from 90 days to 60 days from the date of decision of the site plan approval.
Okay. May I correct, sir, from the date of approval of site plan?
Okay, and Mr. Chara, any?
Just my comment through you, Chair. The complete cycle is 7 days, and in order for it get to us for a full week, every day is different. I would not support 5 days or anything less than 7 days.
Okay. And we'll speak to the other before we discourse.
If I may just make one suggestion, and as a modification to that, understanding what the committee's intent is, that I believe that the conditions associated with the 7 days might be enhanced by saying for a period of 7 consecutive days,
yes,
rather than having just a random 7.
Correct. Yeah. I think that's exactly the spirit.
Yeah.
I'm, truth be told, fine with the all other conditions as indicated, with the exception of extending it to the 60. But I'll leave it to the committee if we want to modify the other request, and we'll before we proceed. I just want to hear from the public as well. Would step forward, sir? You can.
Can I have one more?
Absolutely.
Sir, I'm a mechanical engineer, and that building has not been designed to receive the number of people that's going to be going into it. The interior of that building, for the number of people that are going to go in, it's just unit heaters in there now. You're going to need makeup air for the population that's going to be inside it, and we're addressing the outside of the building without looking at what the building's being designed for. And that's very important. That needs to be addressed 100%.
Absolutely. So just for clarity, and I'll have staff chime in on that as well, but from the committee's perspective, we're looking at the land use principles. Anything above that then becomes building code issues which have to be conformed to. So in terms of, in particular, when it's members of the public and public safety, those, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong.
I can certainly confirm that part of the building permit will be a complete review of this building for building code compliance for the intended use as an assembly occupancy, whereas it was developed as an industrial building. So that would include things like exiting and HVAC and accessibility and all of those things would be reviewed, and through the change of use building permit, that would be required.
Okay, and I just, before you proceed, I just want to, and understanding your concerns, which are rightfully there, the only thing that gives me a little bit of comfort is the fact of how long this has been actually looked at from staff, and a lot of these concerns, in particular from my perspective, have been addressed in the conditions. I mean, these are pretty lengthy conditions, so it is quite onerous. And I think, to your point earlier, a lot of this, perhaps in the past, has been overlooked. Not to say that this is perfect, by no means, but I think a lot of those concerns have been looked at. The parking one is a huge one. The fact that a parking study has been reviewed and understanding that. Now, to your point again, is that does depend on the size of the congregation, but they're limited by those limitations in terms of conditions as well.
But that's today, that's not tomorrow.
Understand.
There is no growth there, and yet there's going to be growth, because that's how they live, by gaining prayer.
Yep.
You know, so it's just a badly designed commercial building. It's not designed for a church or a place of worship.
Yep.
All them lots.
And again,
buildings in
today
there
we're
are
dealing
not.
with compliance and planning aspects. So hopefully we can address and give you enough comfort, or people of the public enough comfort that those have been looked at. Okay. Sir?
Just last point. Condition number 10. It needs some thought. It says that should a use on the surrounding properties within a 300-meter radius from the property boundaries of 1 Lowry Drive, that is subject property, change to a more impactful use allowed under the zoning bylaw. The applicant will be required to update D6 compatibility study for Lowry Drive and adjust environmental mitigation measures as may be necessary at the proposed place of worship on 1 Lowry Drive. Now, I understand that somebody in the vicinity within 300 meters does something which emits odor and noise. He is doing it, other guy is doing it, and we will be subjected to improve our mitigation measures. Is that fair?
Okay, I'll have staff speak to that one as well. I'm under the impression, and there are rights of uses on adjacent properties. That may not be the tenant there currently, but if a tenant comes in that has an allowable use, the opposite.
It's a future condition. Can you impose a future condition?
I don't think that's a future condition. I think that's a current condition. Is that there's someone that can move in that has an actual, even a current owner that decides to change their business. And again, that's the way I look at it, but perhaps staff can enlighten.
Then he should be asked to control his odor and noise. There should be a condition on him.
Let's get some clarity on that.
Okay, so this needs some thought.
Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to say that the industrial uses, category 1 or category 2 or not category 3, these are the permitted uses in the area. So they are the primary use in the area, and a place of worship is to be allowed only if it is not incompatible with them. So even the current application, the staff has recommended approval subject to an updated study to prove that the proposed use is compatible with the existing and also permitted uses. And if the study brings out that it is not compatible with them, then it will not be allowed.
Yes.
So similarly, staff is recommending that to have the condition number 10 in the conditions, that if something, even if this application has been approved, after the study has proved that it is with the recommended mitigation measures, it is compatible with the existing uses, and in future, one or more of the permitted uses in the area become incompatible. I mean, they undertake a use which is already permitted, not permitted use, and that becomes in violation with this place of worship, then they'll have to adopt additional mitigation measures to be recommended through a study.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. So to your point, sir, I disagree with your perspective. I think that that's encompassing the fact that you are now getting potentially a variance or looking or seeking a variance. So the impact to surrounding neighbors should not be altered. So that's, I see where staff's mindset is on that. So, Ms. Corzola?
If I may just make one comment in respect, and I certainly understand the intent of staff and support that approach. I'm just wondering what the trigger would be and what does more impactful use constitute. So in that regard, I would recommend that the condition actually be amended for clarification, because there's no indication of to whose satisfaction this would have to be cleared. So I would suggest that the same wording be used, that should a use in the surrounding properties within 300-meter radius from the boundaries of 1 Lowry change to a more impactful use. And I'm recommending that at that point we add the words as determined by the Director of Development Services, and then allowed under the zoning bylaw that the applicant will be required, and then maintaining the remainder of it. I just don't think that that's an enforcement issue that should be dictated by bylaw enforcement, because I'm not certain what the intent is and what might be considered an impactful.
And I think you're right. The vagueness leaves it open to interpretation for even potentially adjacent neighbor and property rights and so forth. So I think that's a fair insight.
Fair enough.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns? Okay, so just for clarity, sir, all those conditions that have been put forward, you've put some requests. I'm open to amending condition 7. Ms. Corazola, on condition, on the time frame again, can you highlight what your recommendation was on the timeline?
Certain. So for condition 7, the timeline was updated to within 60 days of the date of the decision. And then the measures that had to be complied with is that the period of 7 consecutive days in both of those clauses. Moving on to condition 8, the requirement is that a building permit for the change of use shall be obtained within 60 days of the date of the approval of the site plan.
Okay. And further amended would be condition 10 to the wording as indicated just previously, correct?
Correct,
Ms. Guerrero?
simply adding it as determined by the Director of Development Services.
Okay, so are there any other comments by staff or by members of the public? Any additional information? Any questions by committee members? So, sir, I ask you as a question, all the staff recommended conditions, do you understand and agree to the amendments that we've just put forward? And what's
I agree to condition as amended.
okay? Seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the amended staff recommendations.
Okay, by Mr. Chadha, seconded by Ms. Doppler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved with amended staff recommendations and conditions.
Calling application A18139, Fata Developments Inc., property located at 1453 Queen Street West.
Hello again, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, given that we have lost quorum for this particular application, and at the beginning of the hearing, we didn't have a committee to entertain a request for deferral. Procedurally, because we can't deliberate on this application, it will be added to the next available hearing or at a hearing date within an appropriate timeline satisfactory that the applicant's agent can be in attendance. So go ahead.
So just for clarity, we are suggesting that it will be to the next meeting unless there's other circumstances, Ms. Myers, in terms of...
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would add this to the April 16th Committee of Adjustment hearing, provided the agent is available for that hearing date.
Okay. Is that adequate, Mr. Domes, or do you have any questions as well?
No, Mr. Chair, the April 16th date I am available and willing to attend.
Okay. Is there anyone here, just for clarity, here to speak to this application? Seeing none, staff were, I guess, understanding the rationale that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Given that we had two members absent, 2 members have declared a conflict of interest. The only remedy when we have a conflict of interest is that we maintain a quorum of a minimum of 2 members, and we're unable to achieve that today.
Understood.
And thank Mr. Domes for his understanding and his patience.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
okay, we'll push that to the April 16th meeting.
Calling application A8, oops. I have to get the others off here.
We'll call it again.
Calling application A18165, Giampaolo Investments, Inc., 1 Kenview Boulevard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the
Still
committee.
morning. We have a few minutes.
Well, thank you. My name is Mark D'Souza here, representing Giampaolo Investments Limited. I also have with me Paul Snake, who's assisted on this application as well. I'd like to thank committee for the opportunity. We were here before this committee October of 2018, at which time the application was deferred pending some resolution with staff and some issues. We've since been able to provide what we feel is a adequate rationale for the variance at play. But I wanted to provide the committee with a bit of background and context in terms of why Giampaolo Investments and our group of companies is seeking the variance for this particular 50,000 square foot building. We've been a long-standing business partner with the City of Brampton since the late 80s with Triple M Metal, Metalco Inc., and Geep, our recycling business located on Clark Boulevard, together with our real estate arm, Giampaolo Investments Limited. We have grown, and the successful growth has warranted us to look at global corporate head offices. The existing building that exists at 1 Kenview Boulevard would provide that adequate space we need to put everyone under one roof, which is really great, and I'm pleased to share with you. And in addition to that, the space we're leasing at Clark Boulevard right now is coming up for renewal. We wanted to own a building and stay in Brampton. So those were the 2 motivating factors to move forward with these applications. The land itself presented excess land for us to build and hopefully provide and for quite some time the successful operation of Geep. It's our electronic recycling business. And the variance that we're seeking today would allow us to not only construct that facility, but have the proper parking and access to that particular business. So that's a bit of context.
Thank you. That's very good news to hear that businesses are willing to stay, especially long-lasting businesses. I have one question, just more because I was on a leave when this first came to committee, if I'm not mistaken. I do recall this property for prior variances in the past, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe I'll ask that to staff when we get to this point. I don't see reference. I don't know if those will then be, does that have any implications in this at all or not? Am I correct when we had this about 3 years ago?
With respect to industrial uses on this land?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. No, I'm not aware of any prior variances.
Okay.
I know there was a variance with respect to
location.
the use
Perhaps
of
there
the
was
golf course.
a location next door. Perhaps.
You would park short of the
Yeah, we do site inspections, so I may have just used the parking lot as a because I do remember being in that general vicinity. So just again, just wanted to.
It was likely with respect to the use of the Park Shore Golf Course for assembly and outdoor concerts, things like that.
Okay,
That's the most recent one.
That's just it jogged my memory, so I just wanted to get some clarity on that. Perhaps when if there's any input, then we'll deal with that at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to add to the part of the introduction here, but just to really go to the heart of the matter, this is a variance requesting use of what is currently a buffer zone on the property. And the rationale being that the buffer there, it's quite literal in its in the zoning bylaws. It was there to buffer the adjacent residential area, residential use and zone. Well, the adjacent residential zone is gone. I think now it's zoned agriculture. And staff, and we agree with their assessment of it, that there's no need for the buffer anymore for that buffering of the adjacent use. And so and it ends up being two variances, one to the M1 2615 zone, because it has a Schedule C attached to it, and the zone itself, the buffer is an 06 2626. So they're proposing to encroach into that buffer that used to be, that was there to buffer the residential use as shown on the staff report. And after staff discusses their report, I just want to address a few things in terms of the conditions.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to the agents? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Sure, staff have reviewed this application against the 4 tests and find it supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. The applicant shall submit a site plan application within 90 days of the decision of the committee and address all related matters to the satisfaction of Director of Development Services, including but not limited to table land, tree compensation, planting, and/or cash in lieu in accordance to the city's table land tree compensation protocol. A grading plan stormwater management report must be approved by the City of Brandon Public Works and Engineering Department prior to construction. The applicant shall provide a tree inventory and preservation plan prepared and signed by a registered arborist. The assessment and tree preservation plan shall include the following information with respect to each tree to be removed or be preserved: common name, botanical name, diameter of trunk at breast height, condition of trees such as health, structural damage, or any other pertinent conditions. The TIPP shall identify all tree protection fencing and shall include all trees within the property and neighboring trees within 10 meters of the construction limit. The extent of the variances should be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice, and failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members, staff?
Just to clarify a number of things, and sorry, I won't take too long.
Yep.
The report, and you may have read it, and it goes into some discussion about the use. There is no use variance before the committee, and so I'm not sure why the rationale of even bringing that up under the official plan. It's outside of the background. It's into the actual official plan test, talks about the use. And as I say, that's not before the committee today. It's only the issue about using this buffer area. So just in case there were any questions that come up with it, we're not asking any use variance at all. In terms of the conditions, I think Mr. D'Souza advised that we submitted a committee of adjustment application, met with staff as part of the site plan process. A number of issues were raised. Then we got from staff that they said you should go through a rezoning. And then now we're back almost a year later with a committee of adjustment. And their first condition is saying we have to get site plan approval. Now, whether we go to the committee or not, we have to get site plan approval. But I'm just very curious why then they say, after all this, we have to get site plan approval and we have to get it within 90 days. There's no really need. They haven't constructed anything. There's no need to impose a 90-day requirement on it. They have to get site plan approval regardless if they came to the committee or not. And for that matter, all number 2 and number 3 are required as a part of site plan approval. I just went down earlier today and checked with the city's arborists or staff and their parks planning staff and their environmental staff, and there is this city's table land tree compensation protocol. It applies regardless. So rather than just try to put something in this that's going to be covered anyways, I'd prefer you can just say we just have to get site plan approval, and then rather than trying to dictate what in specific things that are needed when that protocol applies. The other one is number 4, and I know this is a common condition they use, but perhaps it could be worded and say that the extent of the variance be in accordance with the intent of the sketch, rather than it being a very strict interpretation.
Oftentimes,
I think the intent is that to use that. They may find through the site plan process they might have to move things slightly.
Oftentimes we use, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, we use the term generally when we're...
Generally, but I like the idea of just the intent, and it says it being, instead of being strictly limited to that.
Okay.
And So those are my comments on the conditions.
Those are your, okay, perfect. I just wanted to get then staff to weigh in on the other ones. I do sometimes share I echo the fact that if it's already in site plan, why are we looking for it? But that's why I asked the question from staff. There may be a rationale that they want to clarify on that. And in terms of the timing, I leave it to staff to give some input on that as well. So I guess question number one would be the rationale for the timing and also the actual specifics 2 and 3.
Okay, so in regards to the requirement for site plan, the intent is to bring effect to this decision in a timely manner. And so the site plan bylaw doesn't include a provision with respect to a number of days in which a matter has to be resolved in advance. If there's a dispute about the number of days, then staff would be willing to entertain that. But in this case, I think the intent is to ensure that there's continuity moving forward. The remainder of the conditions, like I would note that although the applicant's been in contact with the city on this file for a period of time, there have been periods where there's been an apparent confusion articulated by the applicant that we wouldn't normally expect to see and advancing through logistics of an application. So staff are concerned that the matters be made very clear through the committee's decision to the applicant as to what the city's expectations are. So in normal circumstances, yes, I agree, there may be provisions here that are stated that are functional requirements of approval, but in this case, and I recall very clearly that there was difficulty gaining tree preservation related information from the applicant on this. So staff are agreeable to the proposed variance, but would suggest that the conditions are entirely appropriate. The one condition that staff would be agreeable to amending would be that the number 4, that the extent of the variances be limited to that generally shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. I think that has that effect. And as it relates to the comments that the consultant made regarding the official plan, staff took a perspective on this file that we may not necessarily agree with wholeheartedly, but I'm a little bit perplexed because the overall approval, I believe, is integral. The 4 tests, in our view, have been met. There is a use a matter at play here insofar as the buffer space falls within an open space zone. And staff do want to extend flexibility and recognition to the unique circumstances here, but we also need to address the fact that what we're doing is we're putting a parking lot on a piece of land that's zoned open space. So it's entirely appropriate for staff to talk about use in this case. I would submit. But overall, I'd just suggest that it's an approval. The conditions are in order. The applicant feels that they're redundant. If they are, they'll most certainly be caught through the process, and we feel that they're appropriate given the past history and the application. Our desire to actually set up a framework that moves this group through approval in the site plan process.
Okay, and so just to expedite, I agree with staff in terms of sometimes the way it is in the recommendations is for the benefit of committee members and so forth. So just to give us an overview, that may just be the rationale. It's truth be told, I believe it relevant at this point in time. I do agree with the general intent aspect and the fact of 2 and 3, I believe, aren't necessarily required, but at the same time, if they have to be done, leaving them unless the agents believe that they're contentious in any way. And the time frame, I leave it to the agents to put forward either a timeline or a rationale of, because I do understand that if someone is currently leasing it, there may be actual time frames that in terms of business terms that you may not be putting something forward. So is there a rationale at that point for the timing, or something that your clients would be comfortable of including so that we can meet halfway at points?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, the continuity issue here, I have a hard time understanding. So we did submit a minor variance application. We're told then to go through a rezoning. Now we're back to if anything, the continuity and the confusion did not lie with us as the applicant. And so that's,
I don't want to go into historical ones, I just want to kind of meet something that we're all on
So if it's 90 days or 120 days is fine, just in case, we're actually concerned of how long it's going to take through the City of Brampton's planning staff.
That's something for staff to work on with yourselves and your applicants. Hopefully that can go in a favorable manner, but again, just so that we can expedite is
120 days.
120 days. So just to be clear then, we're looking to amend condition 1 to read 120 days and condition 4 to instead of limited to general intent. Committee members, are we comfortable with that, or are there any questions? Okay, and I ask it again, so I'm reiterating just for the record, you understand and agree to those conditions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm what the wording was for amended condition number 4.
In lieu of limited, I believe after variances to be
in accordance with the intent.
In accordance with the general intent, or in accordance with the intent.
I would say.
Condition with the staff of the extended variance to go into that generally shown on the sketch.
So just confirming that the extent of the variances be limited to that generally shown on the sketch attached to the public notice.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so you agree to those conditions, just for the record?
Yes.
Okay, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the amended conditions.
Motion to approve with the amended conditions by Mr. Chada, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor?
Thank you.
That carries. Thank you.
Calling application A 18171, Yesipadam and Joni Varakala. The property is located at 25 Vivaldi Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is John Varakala, and son of Mr. Yesipadam Varakala. I'm here to assist my father in this. And we've gone through the recommendations by the staff, and we're willing to do the necessary changes for the approval.
Okay. Any other additional information, or anything else you'd like to add to that?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions by committee members to the agent and owners? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Sir, would you like to come down?
Hello, my name is Ramchan. I'm the next door neighbor.
Sorry, just for, so Ms. Myers can get your name and address just for the record.
Ramchan, 27 Vivaldi.
Thank you.
Next door neighbor to Mr. Yasuko.
Okay.
I have a general principle in the total objection of what's been applied here. As the second unit, I have no objection to that. I have objections to, however, the placement of the entranceway. 80% of the homes in our block has two styles. One, a full home with the entrance almost to the front of the home. The second one, whereby there's a huge garage and the entranceway to that home would be almost middle. That's my front entrance, would be middle of where Mr. Padam entrance, already built front door is. So it's exactly opposite my front door. Now, the city has a policy, I understand, that they don't allow entrance, a second basement entrance in front of a home for various reasons. I would like some clarity on what are those reasons.
Okay. So, Ms. Corazzola or whomever?
I'm not certain the the nature of the question, a below-grade entrance, if that is being used as a second entrance, whether it's to a secondary unit or not, but below-grade entrance are not permitted in the front yard between the main wall of a dwelling and the front lot line. That's what the bylaw requires. A below-grade entrance is also not permitted in the interior side yard, in the required side yard, which is why we have this variance before us today. The below-grade entrance may be permitted in the rear yard, as long as it's been constructed in accordance with the building permit.
Fair enough. Now, if you would not permit a second or below-grade entrance in the front of a home, why should it be allowed in front of my home, my front entrance, which is because of the design of the home built 35 years ago, and as I said, almost between these two homes, one after the other, they have that same design. A full home, one with a little setback. Why would the city allow a side entrance or a below-grade entrance opposite my main entrance?
So let me make a suggestion, perhaps.
Yes.
I don't know if we can answer that at this point in time. The city is not allowing it. That is not allowed in the bylaw. It's before this committee to decide if that's an allowable use or location. That being said, perhaps we can have staff put forward their comments and maybe some clarity gets on that, and then we can deal with your specific concerns, if that's fair enough.
That's fair enough.
Okay.
I have lots more objection, or should I hold it off until you...
Perhaps we can, I don't believe, is there anyone else here to speak to this application? So perhaps we can have the staff put forward their recommendations and their input, and then we can deal with your concerns, because some of those concerns may be dealt with in their explanations of sorts. Fair? Okay. Sir? Yes.
Yeah. Before we were making the side entrance, we took his consent, and he was really happy, and we shared sweets in that matter. And now for that issue, we even installed a fence so that there's a privacy for him and us as well. And now it's just scripted up and saying that he didn't want the side entrance in the first place.
Okay.
But at the beginning, that wasn't the.
Okay, and I don't want to get respectfully into a historical perspective. I want to just, let's deal with the issues before us in terms of planning and building. So I'll ask staff to put forward their comments if we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have reviewed this application and are of the view that the application A18-171 is supportable, subject to the following conditions. Condition number 1, that a building permit shall be obtained within 60 days of the decision of the approval for the existing stairway to the below-grade entrance to the house. Condition number 2, that the below-grade entrance shall not be used for an unregistered second dwelling unit. Condition number 3, that the applicant shall provide a side yard drainage design that ensures that the drainage from the applicant's side yard follows the approved drainage design for the property, is unobstructed by the proposed below-grade entrance, is contained within the subject property, and does not impact the adjacent property. The applicant shall obtain a written approval to this effect to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering Services within 60 days of the decision of the approval of the committee. This may require an increase in the setback for the stairway. Condition number 4, that drainage from the shed's roof shall flow on the applicant's property, and that drainage on the adjacent properties not be adversely affected. Condition number 5, that eaves troughs to the shed shall be provided to the satisfaction of the Director of Building Division within 60 days of the decision of the approval of the committee to contain any runoff water within the property. Condition number 7, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question for staff quickly before we proceed. Condition 2 highlights that it's not to be used for an unregistered second dwelling. We do include sometimes, and I'm asking it as a question, that in the event that it becomes registered, will that be an allowable access point for the registered access?
In this case, it would, because it doesn't, this variance is not a variance to the implementing 2-unit dwelling provision. So unlike the other one where it was a landing that was more than 2 feet above grade, which would have required an additional variance if it was to be used as the principal entrance, this entrance, if approved, may be used as a principal entrance because it meets all of the qualifying factors for use under the 2-unit dwelling.
And that was the spirit of my question. I ask it as a question. I mean, again, is this the intention of this to be used as a basement apartment? Is it being?
No, we don't have any intention of renting it out.
Okay.
Or anything. It's just
and again, that's not for this committee to. It's just to be clear that it is not to be used for an unregistered basement apartment. If at any point in time there is a procedure that it can be potentially used as a registered basement apartment, but that is not what we're doing at this point in time. So just so that you are clear.
Yes.
So I ask you as a question, and then I'll ask the other gentleman as well for any other points. These conditions that are all put forward, do you understand and agree to all those conditions?
Yes.
Okay, so that kind of puts that at ease. Sir, would you like to step forward? Any of your concerns, have they been addressed with some of the comments from staff? And if not, what other questions do you have at this point in time?
Yes, I would like to proceed.
Yep.
One of the sentences he agreed to that there would not be a tenant living at the bottom there. This basement apartment, as they would say it, built it and the city would approve it. It was on a scenario like that. It was built illegally. Only when myself and a few neighbors reported, that's when the city came in. In that period of time, there was a tenant living there for almost 2 to 3 months, longer. I didn't take an exact count. And I've lived to see some of the things that the city hasn't looked at. Noise, privacy, loss of the use of your property. There's so much things there that have a negative impact. And I hope the city looks at impact, long-term impact. Whenever we make such a variances or a decision, we just don't look at the structural aspect of it, building code. We look how this affects the neighbor, how this affects the neighborhood in our street.
So let me just, and I apologize, I don't want to cut you off, is the building code issues are dealt with from the building department. This process does encompass all those concerns. Staff does look at that now if they want to chime in as well, but all those implications that are, perhaps you don't agree with their assessment, but that is what the recommendations that they put forward to us is an analysis of everything that you are referring to. So just to be clear that is what staff is looking at. Different departments look at these applications and put forward their recommendations based on potentially exactly like you said, neighbors' concerns, community concerns, and so forth. So that has been looked at. And again, I do respectfully say that you may not agree with what has been put forward, but to be clear, those are looked at from staffing perspective.
If I may chime in? Yep, I would understand it, probably look at it. But how detailed was this looked at? As I've said, I'm the person living there.
Absolutely.
If you were the person living there, I'm quite certain, 100%, you would have thought differently. Couple homes down from me, I'll just give you an example. Couple sold after they were aged, new owners came in. The first thing they did was throw up a huge shed there. Of course, it was illegally. The city came in. The variance was granted. It caused a conflict between the two neighbors. What's the result? No love there. One neighbor, he said, that's enough. He sold. That neighbor who built that structure suddenly decided that I don't like it anymore. He sold. We destroy a community like that.
Yeah, and again, respectfully, sir, is that the variances that we look at planning issues. The fact that there are neighbor and let's call it personal issues that are involved, those are very subjective and they're difficult to analyze in their complexities, as you said. However, staff makes best efforts to include all those in their analysis and put forward, and then this committee then takes those very serious and tries to assess that. And again, I'm trying to be respectful in terms of, obviously, as the person next door, it affects you most or more than most. So, but I do want to ensure you that those are we do look at all those variables.
I agree. If I may continue.
Yep.
Again, it may sound as if I'm repeating myself, but when the council looks at it, with due respect, are we just looking at minimum requirement? Are we looking at maximum requirement, maximum impact? Just not too far from my home, there was another variance of a basement apartment, tenant there, and it was a very disastrous one. Of course, the owner sold afterwards, but there was a murder suicide there. Sorry to bring up such graphic, but these things happen. Now, this door is opposite my front door. The city, when you open your door in the morning, what you want to do? You want to see some sunshine, you want to see some sunlight. You want to see nature to its maximum. You open the door, there's a huge, it's not a fence, it's a wall. It's a wall. And there are requirements for building code on wall, which I noticed it was not even on the sheet there, what you call it, the application. Now, how high is 6 feet?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, to the concerned neighbor, I do understand your concerns you're bringing forward, but at the same time, when you are referencing few houses down from a property or any example you're given, we are not in position to comment on those ones without knowing any background or the knowledge in front of us. So please limit your conversation in regards to this particular property, because few houses down this way or that way, I'm sorry, we are not in position to comment or even agree with you on any of the statement or any of the thing you are mentioning here.
Okay, I will take that as a note. I wouldn't say a few houses down, but what I'm trying to do is make a reference similar to my question here, some of the things we have seen happening on our street. And I have that same concern. I do have that same concern. It's a piece of place I purchased more than 25 years ago. Lived there happily. The previous owners, the first thing when I moved from there, he asked, he said, are you going to build a basement apartment? I said, no. Then we live here forever. Same with the other side neighbor. And both of them lived there until they reached very retired age, and until they couldn't handle the snow anymore. They went to condos and things like that. Now, I'm in a position whereby I would love that same kind of service. We pay a premium to get a street like that. That's why they call it a crest. Nice, quiet. We live just behind a school. I would have loved to see my grandchildren grow up there. My children grew up there. I didn't grow up there. I'm an immigrant. But back home, we share the same home, just like how a mother would hand down the ring to the daughter and the granddaughter. Similarly, I would like to see my grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Now, if something like that is in front of my home, I can't live there. I'll be doing just like what the other neighbors do. And then...
And again, I don't want to feel that I'm cutting you off, by no means, sir. But again, we are a committee of residents as well. So we are not, we are appointed here, but we are residents. So we try and put those into our decision-making. Staff provides us with as much technical information as possible. So philosophically, and again, to be quite frank, you may not like some of the information that you hear. You may not agree with some of the decisions. and you may agree with some of the decisions, but that's the subjectivity of that's why this committee is formed, so that we try and assess everything to its entirety.
I strongly disagree. In this case here, you're assessing based on the applicant's side. What about the neighbor's side? And I'm not speaking for myself. You know, you've had applications many times, and they're opposing applications, portions of opposing those applications. What has the city done to correct those things, that conflict, to stop this conflict?
And again, the conflict, sir, and I just want in particular this committee, every application is dealt with individually. So there are variables, to Mr. Chada's point, that we can't foresee on an application 4 doors down or something along those lines. We can only look at this application in its entirety. And I do assure you that staff has looked at all those variables. That's the information they put forward to us. We go, we do a site inspection, and we put forward our points of view. And again, there may be points of view that you agree with, and there may be points of view that you disagree with. But we're trying to come to a resolution that puts the planning principles into place, but at the same time respecting that these are citizens like ourselves. So we try and put ourselves in your shoes as well. So that's the complexity of trying to reach a consensus.
I understand what you're saying here. But I don't agree 100%, because let me give you an example. When my new neighbor moved in, he told me, indeed, said, I'm going to do a basement apartment. And I requested him humbly. I said, please don't put your entrance door opposite my front door. Because most homes that goes east-west, you know, the sun bears down in the evening. I'm an outdoor person. I love the sunshine. But in the hot evening of the summer, you just can't sit in front of that sunshine. So normally go and sit at the front. And here we're sitting less than 4 feet, less than 3 feet. That's where that entrance is. I'm giving up some privacy. I'm giving up some loss of views. The last tax bill I received, I didn't see my tax being reduced. Why should I give up? Am I being followed? Is the city taking that into consideration? All these things need to be taken into consideration. I've seen some things that I don't know if the city has a vision of it. I'm not attacking you gentlemen and ladies. Brampton, Canada on the whole, we have some wacky winter weather. Recently, just last month, we had heavy snow, 2 days after rain, then freezing rain, more snow, and the ice started melting. I've seen icicles this long hanging off the roof of the gentleman's home, exactly over the entrance of that door. Let a child walk there and one fall. It's a 911 call. Has the city taken that into consideration? Now, this is his door, his new door. This is my front door. It's a 2-story building. Immediately up right of that, there's windows. And it wouldn't be a window to anything else except a bedroom. That's where I sleep. In the summer, I love to open my windows, get a little crack of air. 5 months, you can't open it. In that period of time, I need some fresh air, but I'm a light sleeper. The tenant they had here, as soon as they open the door, close it, slam, I'm awoke. Count 5. Exactly, I could have timed it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's time to reach the gate. Open the gate, pew. My property became a regular street for the tenants. In fact, during all the construction, removing all the mud, all the cement that traveled in here, my property became it. My grass still hasn't been repaired. The walls on my home, there's still splatter of cement there. On the electricity meter, there's still splatter from cement there. I don't keep my garbage can up all the way to the front like many neighbors. I keep it to the side of my home. It was full of muck, cement, and mud. Just to give you some examples. I know you may want to say this is off the topic, but I'm trying to bring out the point of intrusion. loss of use,
And again,
property.
sir, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to at this point in time, because at the end of the day, I understand, and you've made your point very clear. We have and will consider all that. And unfortunately, there are scenarios that sometimes are dealt with, in particular between neighbors, that aren't going to be rectified. Again, I can only assure you that staff has looked at all those to the best of their abilities, and we will make the decision based on everything that they've given us and everything that we've seen when we've gone to the site inspection as well.
Okay, if I may continue, I still have some more objections, some more.
If they're technical to the actual,
Yes, yes, there is. It
I'm going
is.
to keep it very specific, because if it's going to be theoretical, we're not going to change minds. It has to be based on planning principles and anything that actually can sway us in terms of things that we were overlooked.
Okay. I never went to law school. With a layman's way, I may probably explain myself better. Sorry for the inconvenience on that. Hope you all understand. As I said before, there was a tenant there. I'm a non-smoker. And he's saying that, oh, there won't be a tenant. He promised that. But there was a tenant there, 2 to 3 months.
Sorry, Chair. I'm sorry. My apologies to the neighbor. Sir, we are here to look these 3 variances in this application. I sincerely request you, please stick to these 3 variances. Whatever the history between you and your neighbor, I'm sorry, if it's regard to these 3 variances, we are here to listen and making a decision accordingly. And I hope you understand, that is not our scope. I understand your concerns, 100% what you are bringing up, but unfortunately, I wish we could do something about your history. We are only here to look at these 3 variances. Like any of those neighbor arguments or dispute, unfortunately, this board does not have the jurisdiction over those ones. So please be specific, through you, Mr. Chair, again. Whatever your submission is, and obviously there is a time limit as well, we cannot really keep going ever on this one. My apologies again to you. I hope you understand. But please be specific in relation to your technical submissions, because we are not going to listen to any of other things.
So basically you're saying you're not looking at safety, you're just looking at technical, building code.
Safety, respectfully, safety is technical.
That's my point. I'm talking about safety. Noise is a safety issue. I can't sleep.
And again, these are subjective issues. Staff undertakes to look at all those variables. They may not be satisfactory to what you believe or what you like in terms of using the example of the smoke. Unfortunately, that is subjective. It may be 20 meters away, and you still may be sensitive to it. So again, not to be to undermine what you're trying to put forward, but to Mr. Chada's point, we have the 3 variances, and we can only base our decisions based on the 4 tests that govern these variances, and those specifically are official plan, zoning, appropriateness, and minor in nature.
So is it my understanding that you're very limited? You're not open up to all the existing conditions that affects something like that?
This committee looks at those 4 tests. That's what we do. Then there is a process, and not to get ahead of ourselves, if you don't agree to the decision of this committee, you may appeal that decision. But minor variances differ from the larger scope of rezoning. These are just minor variances, have those 4 tests that we actually focus on.
So basically you're saying this is just a farce?
Absolutely. That is the farthest thing from what I'm saying.
Not a farce. No. Basically everything's been passed. I'm just wasting my time.
No, is that if you can bring forward anything.
I do have objections. My next objection was smokers. I said that's what we're going to see. There was a tenant there, and if one
and
new
respectfully,
tenant
sir,
has a smoking,
that
door.
does not meet the parameters that we're looking at.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get, sir. Is your 4 tests limited only to a few questions?
No.
Is it only limited?
And again,
to
respectfully, sir,
building
your
stairs and
interpretation of that
code?
is that if someone was smoking on your front steps,
Not
that's
my
one
front
thing. there's a certain distance, and that's what those setbacks are designed for. There are setback issues. So there's subjectivity on how much is too much, how much is too little. That's the determination that we're trying to make. If smoking if you are extremely sensitive to smoking, right? Unfortunately, those variances may not ever come into satisfaction to you. So this is what we try and weigh. So staff has put forward all the recommendations on a technical side. As committee members, whom are not, we are not counselors. We are actually committee members that are members of the public. We go to the site and we analyze it on the basis of, to your point, if we lived next door, would we be okay with that? That's what we try and put into this. And that's where we are always trying to govern or balance those two, technical from the four tests, because there is subjectivity to that. In particular, when it's minor in nature or appropriate, there's always subjectivity to that. So again, respectfully, sir, if there's anything pertaining to planning principles or those four tests, then we'll hear. If not, we can continue to have discussions on, neighboring issues.
So I in my understanding, you're calling this a neighborly issue.
I'm calling the fact that if there's something that is actual planning based, we'll hear it out. If it's a matter of respectfully, he said, she said, this, that, we cannot hear that out.
I don't think I've said many he said, she said.
Okay.
I'm giving you facts as I've seen it. As I said, I'm not a law student.
No.
I wouldn't put it the way how you put it, but I can talk in a layman's term.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't apologize for that. I mean,
and we don't ask that. And again, respectfully, we are laymen's. That's the reality. We are citizens that are hearing you.
If I may continue, can I continue? Or
again, if it's based on planning principles, sir.
What's the city view on frontage and side yard in our case, where my front is his side? Is there a variance to that? Is there, remember, that's how the builders built it 35 years
Ms.
ago.
Corazzola, can you just highlight the difference between the side and interiors, front yard?
Recognizing that this neighbor's front door is set back well into his side yard because the garage projects into the front yard. I understand that he is suggesting that the side yard of one dwelling is his front yard, but it is two abutting side yards. Even though, and certainly to highlight, his front door is opposite or generally opposite the side entrance of this. That's the main entrance to his home. But it's in the side yard down beside the garage.
Okay. So the differences between front yard and side yard, sir?
No, that's the terminology. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Sorry I didn't get your name. Thank you for that. But what I'm trying to say, the city view, if this is my front, shouldn't I have get the same respect? Because remember, I didn't build it, it was the builders who built it. Shouldn't I get the same respect from the city that this is your frontage, you should have beauty in front of you?
And the respect level is the fact that this committee comes together to hear both sides, and if there's anything that is altered, we try and put forward the best resolution or agree to what is right in terms of planning and what is right in terms of neighborly issues, if you will. And that's what we're tasked with. So those are things we do look at, and that's why. And again, pardon the repeated wording, is that you are indicating that we don't look at those, and that's everything that we do look at.
If I might, there was one item that the gentleman did bring up, and that's in terms of the fence that's existing. Does that conform with the allowable height and the distance? And the second part of that question would be, would 25 Vivaldi be able to bring their fence forward in line with the side of their garage? Or conversely, would the gentleman at 27 Vivaldi be able to do some fencing in terms of hedges or something else if he doesn't want to view the side of 25 Vivaldi, because with respect, you bought the home looking at the side of another home. That was the way it existed. Whether there's a stair coming out, if somebody's using it 25 times a day, or once a week, we won't be able to school that or review that in any way. But if additional screening is something that might help the situation, that's the only thing we can speak about. We can't speak about whether there are smokers in one home and smokers in another. It's their property. They can do what they want. That does become a neighbor issue. But what we can look at is, in terms of what you did bring up, was the fence that exists there and whether the height is appropriate, and also the extent of that fence.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the best of my knowledge, the fence does not exceed the allowable 6 feet 6 inches. That's permitted by the bylaw. They are allowed to extend a 2-meter high fence down to the front wall of the dwelling, and in fact, up in line with the front wall of the garage. And the same situation would go for both property owners. That's all considered to be interior side yard. It's only the distance between the front face of the garages and the front lot line that it would be limited to 1 meter in height. So certainly the location of the higher 2-meter fence between the homes and up to and including the front face of the garage would be allowed by the zoning bylaw.
And then through you, Mr. Chair, the neighbor on 27 Vivaldi could plant shrubs in front of that fence so that you get the desired view of nature, which you currently don't have with or without the stairs going to the basement.
Now, if you can picture with me, I thank you for your input. From the back of our home to almost just about 2 feet from the beginning of my entrance to the back, we have a 4-foot fence. And then suddenly it rises, and as I said, it doesn't look like a fence. It looks more like a wall, solid, no fair view. It's more than an eyesore.
That's, again, sir, that's your interpretation. It is the allowable bylaw. So just, again, someone may find it attractive. You do not find it attractive. We can't deal with that. And again, I'm going to be frank now, is the fact that I have to call the question unless there's something forward that you can put something more you can put forward.
Well, these are all impacts. And how the city comes to what is allowable impact and what is not allowable impact, what is sentimental impact and what is neighborly impact, it's a big question.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
It is, and that's the subjectivity that we're looking at when we do our site visits, sir.
Yes, yes.
So you may not agree with what we're doing, and again, but at the same time is that's the difference between bylaws, which are to the millimeter and carved in stone, and then there's subjectivity, what this committee can actually grant, agree to, or disagree to. So the committee has gone and reviewed and I guess went there. Now, we don't live there 24 hours a day, obviously. But we go there and we make our best efforts to try and encompass your concerns and your rights with your neighbor's rights.
Through you, Chair, to the neighbor, to all your concerns you outlined, I personally noted, and I'm sure the same with the committee. So we are in that process to review the application. You came forward, thank you, to bring in your concerns. Some of them under our jurisdiction, some are not. In the future, if you may have any, you can contact obviously the city, or if you feel it's not in city's jurisdiction, you can contact other law enforcement or whatever it fall under. So at this point, we are here to listen what staff says. We already noted your concerns. If you have anything else in these 3 variances being sought out by the 25 Vivaldi Crescent owner, if you have something in particular on those ones, please, you are more than welcome. Otherwise, we need to proceed in regards to this application.
I do have lots more, but I'm basically saying in a layman's word, I'm being told to shut up.
Sorry, through the chair, respectfully, no one is telling you to shut at this point, but how many concerns you have beside this? Can you please number them?
I don't have them in the form of a number, I'm speaking on jottings here, some from my head, some from writing.
Okay, and this is where I will come. If it doesn't pertain to the variances being sought, we will not hear them. So it has to be specific to the variance.
So if you only list 3 variants and you're not listing the vagueness of those variances, so you're ruling me out.
No, we've been listening to you, sir, for several minutes, and we're trying to be as respectful as possible. So again, if there are any specifics to those variances, because that's all we're dealing with. So respectfully, is that this committee cannot look, as Mr. Chadha said, to other aspects other than these 3 variances and the 4 tests that pertain to these variances. That's what we're governed by. So we can't make decisions based on anything other than that.
I understand you're under limitations, but you understand my point. I'm saying there's a vagueness of rules. There's an impact to the surrounding neighborhood, and it should not be altered. We are a very old neighborhood, 35 years. I've been there more than half of my life.
Okay, so sir, is there anything else that you'd like to include?
Yes, I would like to see something else.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may. Just so it's clear, we are not able to comment on anything such as quiet enjoyment of your home. Those are under different bylaws. We can only be here to see if what is being put forward creates any substantial issues. So when you bring forward smoking, that does not come under our jurisdiction. I think that's what we're just trying to say. If there are icicles coming off of a roof, we can't comment on that. That is not under our jurisdiction. So we're trying to help you understand what we are capable of doing within this committee. So we are limited to what's put in front of us. If there are issues, one neighbor to another, if there's smoking, if there's noise, if there are any such things that fall under quiet enjoyment, that falls under a different jurisdiction, and I think we might ask the zoning bylaw expert who you might call if there are such issues. But unfortunately, we neither can hear them nor can we comment on them. That is the limitation of our committee.
So my understanding is I have to take it to another level after you finish your okay with it.
If there's something that is of concern to you in terms of the quiet enjoyment of your home and your property, then yes, that falls under a different jurisdiction. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are very restricted with what we have here. So it's the built environment around the outside of the homes, in this particular case, that we are looking at. So when you brought up the fence, that was a valid concern, and it was a valid question. We've checked, and that does fall under the parameters of what is allowed. And for clarification, I also asked if that could be extended, and the answer was yes. So that's as far as we can go. If there's somebody smoking on their property that transmits to your property, we're not allowed to comment on it. It is outside of our jurisdiction. So yes, you would have to go elsewhere. I think that's maybe the simplest way of explaining where our responsibilities lie.
I admire the way how you put it. Go elsewhere. I'm done here. I'm being booted out. Thank you, Brampton.
Okay, so we've heard from the neighbor. If there is no further information.
With your permission, can I speak a half minute?
Is it pertaining to the?
Yes, sir. I don't understand what are the allegations he brought. They're all false.
Okay.
Number one.
I'm going to cut you off, sir. Just like is that we're not dealing with any.
Number two, sir.
Is that I'm going to cut you off, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
If it doesn't deal with these variances, I do not want to hear it. Yeah. Is it got to do with these variances?
Just before, we just like to add one thing, and we like to ensure that nothing would be done illegally, and
that's
we want
not,
to go
and again,
bylaws.
that's your obligation ongoing beyond this committee.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear that these are 3 variances that are being sought. Staff has put recommendations forward and have conditions put forward. Do you understand and agree to those conditions?
Yes, sir. We want to comply with everything. And
if there are no further questions, because and again, trying to be as respectful, but that has now led to 40 minutes of conversation, and we haven't actually said much other than a few fence issues. So I'm trying to be as reasonable as possible. Therefore, if there are no further questions, comments, or concerns, I'm seeking a motion to proceed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, one quick question. Just in terms of the basement, if that is rented out to somebody? No, but I'm just, if it's rented out to somebody and that is found to be the case, what is the fine, Ms. Corzola?
The fine under the Planning Act, it would be both a fine under the Building Code Act and the Planning Act, both of which could total $25,000 each for an individual if the maximum sentence is imposed by the court. But that would require trial through the provincial court system and then sentencing by the judge.
Okay, thank you. I just want to get those parameters out there so that they're understood.
Okay. So, through you, Chair, as the applicant said, they understand and accept these conditions. I would put forward the motion to approve staff's recommendations.
Okay, motion put forward by Mr. Chada to approve with staff's recommendations. Seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there is 20 days.
There is a 20-day appeal period for anyone that disagrees with the decision, and even for yourself, sir, that is a 20-day appeal period that nothing can be, that's when the decision becomes final and binding.
Just a quick question, sir. So we have this 60-day time frame to apply
Already
for
dealt with through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, the building permit needs to be obtained within 60 days, which is an additional 20 days from today's date.
Okay,
So it would
after
be 80
the
days.
20 days. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's, again, pending that there is not an appeal, and that may be something else that you'll have to deal with as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If there is no further business, anyone in the audience here to speak on anything else? Seeing none, seeking a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Chada, seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned.